Hola.
Hello, Campbell.
Campbell, what's happening, man?
Charles, nice to see you, amigo. Very nice to see you.
Great to see you. You look great. You look great, man.
Yeah, and if you know what I've been through, you would really say that. Like, it's not been regular times, and I don't just mean COVID. We'll catch up.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm so glad to see you.
Green, what's happening?
Hi,
Hey,
yes,
nice.
I'm Green. And I'm Nancy Kidder, Professor Kidder.
I
please
figured
Nancy.
you were. I like Professor Kidder better.
Campbell, are you coming in from New York or the West Coast? Where are you coming from?
Well, I'm in Westchester, New York, so it's not New York City.
Oh,
I'm in Lockdown. I'm on the Sound. It's nice. It's always particularly nice in the spring when COVID, was ripping through Manhattan. So
I know. Oh, I know. I that and having just a little bit more space. I live in DC, and what used to be so wonderful is that I live on Nebraska Avenue. I can walk to restaurants and the metro. Not so important anymore, but I wish I had that big house, maybe a pool.
yeah, I tell you, I mean, house is good, right? Because different rooms to go to, right? I mean, that's good. There's no doubt.
Yes.
But yard is really good.
Yard is very good. I know.
Because you're reminded that there is a world out there.
Yes, nature is great. I'm going to retweet the link that we are on, and I'll tag you, Campbell.
Okay.
I'm
pulling up your list of topics that were great. I love the syllabus. I love the reading list. I want to take class.
Please, you are welcome. You are always welcome, an honorary student, and I'll give you an A even.
Well, you're the only professor that ever said that to me. So.
Are you recording already?
I am recording.
Okay, I didn't know if you record that promise of giving out A's to students. It seems risky.
I mean, there's VIP students.
Yeah, celebrity students get it.
When you are actually part of the syllabus, you get an automatic A. When you are part of the history that we're covering, that's my philosophy. So
Washington showed up in a class about American history, he should get an A.
Exactly. So then
I don't know Washington event.
So then I am telling Mike Tyson, Floyd Mayweather, I'm thinking of some other people, if they want to come on into my class, they get an A as well. So it's equally to anyone who makes their mark in writing and fighting. I give it. Campbell, I'm going to introduce you in just a second, but we have a panel here. I have students. This is our final week. We are entering exams. And so a lot of my students actually, this is not officially a class. They are supposed to be doing a reading period. So they've sent me some questions and they're going to watch this. They've told me they're going to watch it recorded. And some are actually watching it in the middle of the night because I have several Chinese students who are watching, and it is 12 hours ahead. It is 4 a.m. So they are also in the audience. And I have a student from Panama. So, Latin America, as we're going to talk about, very important part of your community of viewers. Really quickly, I'm Nancy Kidder. I am a professor of writing and fighting at American University. I've taught this since 2017 on the literature of combat sports. And I have a group of other intellectual academians, I should say, who are joining us. And can you guys just go around real quickly and tell me where you're from and say hello to Campbell?
I still be here. Should I turn off my camera?
No, Gerald, you're an alum. He's an American University alum. You're definitely welcome to this conversation. Tanisha, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I didn't know what was around in your.
I know, you're right.
I never know which way.
No.
counterclockwise today? Like, what's going on? But Alicia, I teach media psychology, which is what I have my PhD in at Fielding Graduate University. I'm focused on that intersection between technology, fandom, sports, and storytelling. So I do a lot of work in that field for like sports management, athlete marketing, and overall digital communications. And nice to meet you, Campbell. Thank you for being here.
Dr. Singleton, I want to take your classes too. That sounds like I could really use some of that info.
An automatic A. Another one.
If I get the guarantee, I'm in, by the way.
And another one. You definitely get the A and anytime.
All right.
Thank you, Tanisha. Kyle, can you go next?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of sociology at SUNY Brockport. My areas of expertise are culture and theory, and I've published on sports and politics, and also done a lot of research on the allure of training in mixed martial arts. So why people are drawn to this kind of physical, painful sport, and what the appeal is of actually doing the activity. And yeah, you're welcome to take sport and society when I teach it too. I don't know if I'm giving out A's is quite as easy.
I want the AAA too.
Yeah.
All right, you guys aren't going to heckle me during this, are you? Because I don't know.
No, I don't know if you were prepared to get homework, but I think we're all basically handing it out at this point.
No,
Right.
Campbell, you got to realize we are fight nerds. So you got to tell us when we're overthinking.
Please.
Okay. And we're overanalyzing.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's possible. Honestly.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure that's possible. This is one of the richest endeavors that people can be involved in, and that's why I was so delighted to talk about it. And I think it's the history of human beings. And I think I'm hard to stop once I get rolling, and Charles knows that. So, Charles, give me a quick update what you're up to. And there's no pain involved in our sport. Why did Kyle say that? I mean, there's no pain.
Well,
Can I say that Charles and Campbell have history? They know each other. So this is a reunion.
so I went to American University. I'm an alumni, and I didn't get any A's while I was there, but I'd love to go back and maybe get a couple just to pad the account. I actually worked for Campbell when Combate was first starting up. I reached out to him over LinkedIn. I was still a student at this time. I was just getting ready to graduate, and the poor guy. I think I badgered him for months just to meet up and have a conversation. And to bring it full circle, I did my first time doing commentary was on Combate's show. It was Combate Ocho. That was in LA at the LA Exchange. And since that time, I've actually opened an MMA gym myself. I have a few different partners on that. And I'm still competing here and there, but I've also been doing commentary now for Cowboy Fight Series, which is Donald Cowboy Cerrone's MMA promotion that is local right now, but is also bounced around. So I've stayed active, and I've worked with Nancy on quite a few different projects, I would say, at this point. And honestly, I love going to these classes. So I wish they had this when I was a student at AU.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it. And Gerald, do you just want to tell us, you are an American University graduate and a huge MMA fan, and you also train as well. So
Yeah, I'm a recent AU graduate. I kind of found my way to MMA and jiu-jitsu through AU, just from an HFIT class that turned out to be mostly Muay Thai, and just from that professor learned that I should try jiu-jitsu, and now it's like my favorite hobby, and just a huge fan of MMA in general. And I just reached out to Nancy on Twitter one day, I think because Kareem Zidane had retweeted her, and was like, hey, I'd love to be involved. And I didn't realize that I was going to be part of a panel, but hey, here I am.
well, that students are our future. And sorry, Gerald, when you talk to me, I bring students into the real deal. I also tell students, I want to try and publish your paper too. I'm sure Kyle and Tanisha know that that's what I find the most fulfilling in teaching. So I'm happy to have you here. Now to the main event, Campbell Mclaren. He is the co-founder and co-creator of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, orchestrating its first televised event on November 12, 1993. As head of program at Semaphore Entertainment Group, Mclaren brought the idea of the fighting style battle royale into a profitable pay-per-view series and sparked the global sporting phenomenon mixed martial arts. Mclaren is also the founder and CEO of Combate Americas, the first Hispanic MMA sports and media franchise. Combate Americas has grown rapidly with record ratings on Univision and ESPN Latin America, and is the highest rating MMA organization on Televisa, Mexico's largest TV network, beating the UFC. In 2014, Combate won the Imagen Award for Best Reality Series. I think you beat The Voice and some others in 2014. Created by Norman Lear, this award goes to producers who present the Latinx community in a positive manner. Mclaren's work has been shown at Southwest Sundance Film Festival, the Berlin Film Festival, and received multiple international awards. A graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, Mclaren has also studied documentary filmmaking with Richard Leacock at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I didn't even include everything, Campbell. I know that we have college humor that you were behind.
My American University connection with Dave Knoll and his brother Chris. We launched College Humor with a TV series called Get Stupid, and the host was American University. American University. So that was some fun stuff too. A lot of people were angry at me for that. I've had a career of people being angry at me, some of which appears in your the syllabus and the readings.
Oh, right.
So
it shows you, students out there and colleagues, you don't always have to play by the rules, right? Wait, there are no rules.
There are no rules.
There are no rules.
There are no rules. That's very true.
Can we start there, Mclaren? Or actually maybe before that, because you've also told me that you were the manager for Joy Behar and David.
Larry David. Curb Your Enthusiasm.
So you have a comedy management background. Did that predate your time at SEG, excuse me?
Yeah, it actually did. I'll give you a very brief. So, I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker and studied with a lot of notable people. I studied with Auguste Renoir, who's Jean Renoir's grandson, and Auguste Renoir, the painter's son. And that was at Berkeley, and Richard Pena, who ran the New York Film Festival forever. And you mentioned Ricky Leacock, who's a genius cinematographer and filmmaker, shot D.A. Pennebaker's Don't Look Back, which was the seminal film about Bob Dylan, and shot Primary, which was the John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey primary, when tiny cameras were just invented. This is why MIT was teaching this. And small cameras meant a filmmaker could get access to things that Hollywood couldn't, right? Because those proverbial smoke-filled back rooms that they talk about in politics, in Primary, Ricky Leacock's back there shooting John Kennedy, smoking a Cuban cigar, bitching about the steel industry, right? And if you think, and what an arc that is with our current president. I'm mixed up on who's the president now. I'm not really clear. Maybe you guys are in Washington, you have more information. But the current president is tweeting, right? Like directly to people, right? And then John Kennedy, to an extent by mistake, let D.A. Pennebaker film him he wasn't even aware of what was going on. And so if you look at that arc in politics, it's gone from being hyper, meta, the president talking directly to people, controlling the flow of information, making it up as he goes along. I don't mean to offend any fans of the current president, but I mean, to me, that's such a difference. And that jump in media is all about what happened and transpired in media in the last 50, 60 years. And that's informed sports, it's informed scripted entertainment, it's informed every aspect of our culture, including art, including the fine arts. So I think that was a good background for me to think about how you present things. And I had good training, and I studied literally with geniuses, which was good because it made me realize I wasn't one. So I was going to have to go figure out how to do something else besides rely on my genius. But that was good. I came to New York. I worked as a photographer for Japan when I got out of Berkeley, which was a gig I talked my way into. I was an okay photographer, but I'm a great talker. And so I lived in Japan for a while and realized I didn't actually want to produce any. I didn't want to make anything with a camera because you got to carry it. And then if you got to do actual work and you got to go somewhere. And it was too much. I realized I want to be a producer because you could talk people into stuff and then you get people to do the actual work. And that seemed like a much better gig for me. Right? I have the highest, I collect photography. I love documentaries. I do not have the patience or the attention to detail to be an artist, but I like art and I can talk. So that's a good combination for a producer. So I came to New York and comedy was hot. I mean, it was, I came to New York in 1981. Comedy was cool. It's not as cool now. Then it was the coolest thing. It was like jazz in the 50s and 60s. It was super cool. Only and turned out to be run by these mafia guys. And I wasn't really familiar with how the mafia worked, so that was pretty good information. And I couldn't explain to them I was Scottish. In New York, you're either Black, Puerto Rican, Jewish, Italian, or Irish. That's your choices. So a Scottish guy doesn't fit into, so I was the Irish guy. So that was a whole experience. And from there, I met a woman named Caroline that has a eponymous comedy club. Caroline's still there, still famous, and produced my first TV show, worked a lot with Jerry Seinfeld, was managing Larry, which was a fucking it was a nightmare. It was a total nightmare because if you watch the show Curb Your Enthusiasm, that's happy Larry. That's Larry with $350 million. That's Larry before his wife ran off with Al Gore. So that's happy-ish Larry. So when I was managing Larry, he didn't have $350 million. He didn't have a wife, and he was unhappy Larry, and that was a nightmare. But he is a genius. Anyway, so I started to understand the TV business, and SEG was a division of a huge German media company called Bertelsmann. BMG is the division I work for, and they started to get into pay-per-view, which 25, 30 years ago, that was sort of high-tech TV because you ordered it, it was uncensored, there was sort of a digital component, even though there wasn't really the internet yet. And you could do anything you wanted. And as I promised, so I got brought in to come up with non-music projects. So the music projects were losing money. And as I promised on Twitter and wherever else I put it, can you see this?
Yes.
So that's Andrew Dice Clay. Don't hold this against me, folks. It made a lot of money. And I didn't invent Andrew Dice Clay. In fact, I wouldn't let him play at Caroline's because we were in Chelsea and it was a very gay part of town. And it was really a gay neighborhood. And it was in the midst of the AIDS crisis. And I couldn't have this homophobic, racist, misogynist son of a gun play there. But after he got banned everywhere, it says no apologies, but I guess I'm making my apology. After he got banned everywhere, I figured an uncensored TV platform would be good for a guy that had millions of fans. He sold out the Superdome. He sold out Madison Square Garden. He was foul. I guess he was selling tickets to the parents of the Trump voters. I guess that's what was happening. There's how many people voted for President Trump? 70 million? I mean, it's a lot of people. Anyway, so I sold all of them Andrew Dice pay-per-view. And it is to date still the highest rated comedy pay-per-view. I mean, it just made so much money. We had to get other trucks to get the money. And that's the money I used to do the first UFC. So.
Wow. That is so interesting. And by the way, my brothers got that. I have older brothers. I would have been, what year? This is 93.
Yeah.
So I would have been, I was born in 77. So, a teenager. And I watched Andrew Dice Clay. Sorry, Mom, and everyone who knew, but that he was a phenomenon. And it's interesting that you found this outlet that where you could do it. Now, I'm so curious because I remember cable back then. I'm trying to think, did it actually connect to the TV? I don't think it was that point. That was more in the 80s. But where would someone find SEG? Would it be always, was it kind of more of an access? Was it with their, on their, like, where would they find it?
Well, I will talk about MMA at some point,
Yeah.
but since you asked that,
I'm very curious.
look, this is, see where it says no apologies right there, no apologies. So this is my apology. So I was doing a lot of activist shows because SEG was a TV producer. So we did pay-per-view because I started doing really well in pay-per-view. Like I made the Germans a lot of money. But I did Amnesty International shows for HBO. I did Paul McCartney's tribute to Linda for PETA. I did the International Women's Film Festival when I found out the GGA, the Directors Guild, was about 50-50 men and women, but 90% of the hours worked were male. So it doesn't matter what your group consists of. If 90% of them get all the work, it doesn't matter. So I did the Lifetime Women's Film Festival, and Adrienne Shelley, who created the film and then the Broadway play Waitress. So I gave her start in that. So I did all these, whatever you want to call it, lefty, progressive stuff. And maybe that's what's going to get me a little less hot chair in hell when I go to hell for the other stuff, for the Andrew Dice Clay and, two men enter, one man leaves, all that stuff. They're going to, yeah, but he did the PETA show with Paul McCartney. That was a good show.
Well, Campbell, I tell my students, we talk a lot about cognitive complexity, meaning two things can be right, meaning you can have created the platform for MMA and also have created and used Andrew Dice Clay, who was a character. A lot of my students only know him as the dad in the Lady Gaga movie, A Star Is Born. So it's interesting.
Which he was great. And he's also the doorman in Pretty in Pink, which I'm sure your students are still watching, even though whatever it is, 30 years old at this point.
But so no worry about trying to, that we aren't judging here because we understand that we look at things in a historical manner. And but I'm also, everyone knows this about me, I'm very curious. So I have to ask you, because I've read reports, I've listened to the podcast 30 for 30, No Rules, which I have my students listen to, as well as we watch.
The one I walked out on.
So
right?
I didn't know you walked out on that. Your voice is in it. So
yeah, that was there was almost a little violence related to that one.
Wow.
But,
well, I'm glad it's there because I think that there was supposed to be a movie coming out about UFC 1, the beginning, but I don't know if it ever came out or something, because for me this is history and I want my students, like, I want the Ken Burns catalog so they can review it. Do you know what's going on with that movie that I'm mentioning? Oh
yeah, I sort of do. I got a short fuse, and Charles has seen me blow up a couple times, and there's a guy named Ari Emanuel, and then it was a whole thing. I don't think it's going to happen right now, but that's part of what I know you want to talk about in the class. I have composed some thoughts, Professor Kidder. Let me get into it a little bit. Feel free to interrupt. I can't do short answers, and everything's a friggin' story with me. And I had a screaming man. Ari Emanuel is a well-known guy and runs Endeavor, and he tried to buy Combate a couple years ago at the Four Seasons in New York, and we had kind of a yelling match. Here, look, Charles really knows this. MMA and boxing, like, the guys are really tough. Like, Mike Tyson still scares people. He's 53 years old. He scares me when I see him on TV, right? So a little schmuck like Ari Emanuel doesn't scare me, because I am dealing with people that could choke me unconscious and then turn me inside out and then flip me back the other way before I even knew it happened. So some 5 foot tall Hollywood schmuck does not scare me. And so, when they go into their act, I go into my act,
All right.
Anyway,
Sorry,
so that's
you've
the
been
whole
called
thing.
out.
The movie's not happening. The movie, and a lot of it has to do with Hoist and Horion, and how the Brazilian mentality that everybody's out to screw me comes through in a lot of their business dealings. Anyway, look, you mentioned it, I saw in the reading list or in the syllabus, you talk about the Iliad. Yes, I read it. Yes, it was 400 years ago when I was in college, but I often quote the Bible as the first fight story because, Homer, it's the Trojan War, so it's a war, right? But the Bible's got the first fight story. Like the first story in the Bible is actually a rom-com, right? It's Adam and Eve. So it sets up romantic comedies for the rest of time, right? It's Adam and Eve. And you could see, it could be funny. That could be, the next big story is Cain and Abel. And, that's a fight. It's a fight with a rock, but there are no rules. So what you've got, and whether you are religious, a-religious, anti-religious, non-religious, the Bible's a collection of stories. And the Bible's a very old collection of stories. And so the Bible starts with Genesis and the creation, and then you get Adam and Eve, and then you have a fight between brothers. So it's even more powerful. So no matter where you look in our history, you see the fight story. It's always a fight, conflict. There's always a fight because that's how humans are. Now, I am a little religious, and I do believe there is a God. And one of the proofs in my mind is God made heads stronger than hands. Because, you pop someone, like in UFC 1, Gerard Gordeau broke both his hands in the first fight. You remember that was tournament style, so that you had to win 3 fights in one night, right? 8 guys, 3 fights. So he breaks the left hand fighting Taylor Tooley, the sumo. And I go back to see how everything's going, and he's got his hand in a bucket of ice. Got the left hand in a bucket of ice. And then he fights, who did he fight second, Charles? I'm drawing a blank.
It was Kevin Frazier, maybe?
Yeah, Kevin Rozier. Kevin Rozier. So he breaks his right, because there's no gloves in UFC 1, right? Tank Abbott wears the first gloves in 6, I think. So he breaks his right hand in the fight. So he's getting ready to, and I go back to see what's happening, and he's got 2 hands in buckets of ice, right? His hands are broken, and he's going to go fight Hoist Gracie. And that's when I realized, that's the setup. If our hands were stronger, humans would have wiped each other out, 40,000 years ago, right? So nature, God, the universe, whatever, the MMA gods, whoever you believe in or don't believe in, hands aren't as strong, right? And so that gets us that's where boxing comes from, right? They got to figure out a way to, protect the hands. Because you keep breaking your hands, it's it's tough. It's tough. Not a lot of people want to break their hands sparring, right? So you need the gloves. And I saw so much of the literature you have is about boxing, and that makes sense. There's a great Roman statue that's been on display at the Met, the boxer. And if you see that statue, and that drew record crowds, one statue did as big as any of the Mets big shows.
Yeah.
When you see the guy, and I know his body language, everything is sore, everything is tired, every muscle is worn out, and he's got those suborbital scars, and his hands are wrapped, and his hands are big, because you can usually tell a fighter. There's a couple ways. They kind of have oversized hands, particularly boxers. And you see that, and that's a 2,000-year-old statue, and I recognize that guy. I know that guy.
Yeah.
And so that's, MMA has not yet had the art that glorifies it or exemplifies it or symbolizes it or analyzes it the way boxing has. Hogarth, the English lithographer and, an artist. He did great boxing stuff. Lord Byron would go ringside. I guess he was doing the laudanum and smoking the opium and going ringside. So yeah, that's pretty contemporary. And then and Norman Mailer, I like Norman Mailer, writes a lot about boxing, And look, Rocky, John Avildsen said that's a love story.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, it's got a love story in it, but guys don't watch love stories 10 times in a row, right? And that's what I do with Rocky, because the fight scenes are so good. So I don't know if it's a love story, because I see it as a boxing movie. So we have yet to see in MMA this great art around our sport. There's you can name your MMA thing that you like, whether it's Kingdom or whatever you're going to name. I like Here Comes the Boom, because Kevin James is a friend, and he shares a manager with Joe Rogan, and the three of us know each other well. And that's how I brought Joe Rogan into The Ultimate Fight. I like that because it's about a teacher, and that's probably what toughened him up, because I think a teacher's a tough gig. Professor Kidder, I don't know how much pain your students put you through, but I know other schools it does happen. And I like that movie because the guy was trying to make a little extra money, right? Kevin's kind of broke and he needs to make a little dough. And Charles knows how much people get paid, right? It ain't a lot. It's not a lot until you get to a certain level. Boxing's the same.
Yeah. Ross Rugen is good in that movie too.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And Jeff Sussman, Kevin, and he also manages Bass.
I actually think it's a sweet movie. I watched it with my daughter when she was young, hoping, because she for some reason I can't get her into fighting. She's 16, but you don't ever want to like what your parents like. But I've told her she's into Pokemon, and this is kind of goes to your point, Campbell. I don't know if you know much about Pokemon. It's all
I have 3
centered
so yes,
around fighting. They go to there's a trainer and they contest. I mean, if you look around, as you say, and I think that this is something too that we talk about in our class and in Tanisha and Kyle's class, is that the human conflict, fight or flight, is part of who we are. And it's been interesting, especially with your career, as you've been, society sometimes decides we don't like it or we are going to push on, but it's always part of us. One thing we talk about, Campbell, and I'm curious, do you know this? Why is the boxing ring called a ring? Do you know?
I was hoping you could tell me.
Oh. It's because
I can tell you about MMA, but
I know. Well, it's kind of interesting because no one ever thinks about it. It's obviously a square, and but we call it the ring. And that they believe it came, back in the days when in the 1800s, street fighting in the UK, it was underground. It was considered illegal, although most of the police just looked the other way. But what happened was that spectators would come around and create a ring. And so I find that so interesting to always think about, is that we always go back and forth between this is uncivil to, later on when we have the commodification of sports, and Kyle can talk about this, when we realized how it could help with workers and industrial revolution and gambling, that became something that was much easier to do. It becomes legal. And this goes to my point. I still want to go back to UFC 1 because I have you here and I'm very curious, but it goes into the point that after UFC became the success, I think it was, I don't know what you guys expected. And before pre-internet, to think that you guys got 86,000 of pay-per-view back then, that's huge numbers. And you came in and you built it, and it was becoming this phenomenon. You then had the media and government come down, and you talk about Senator Don McCain selling you, trying to ban the sport. So you've been through that. And I bring this up because we are having to shift in administration. And I'm curious how you're feeling. That it seemed in some of our correspondence that you're ready. You never rest, and you keep yourself alert. So what are your feelings?
Great question. And I told you I'm, somewhat friendly with Andrew Yang because I think he is going to be involved in the labor issues that the UFC are facing. And, President Trump, and I say President Trump out of respect because I was horrified at the things people called the last president. I went to President Obama's inauguration, and and I was part of the candlelight donors group and went to the candlelight dinner. And it bothers me to say President Trump, but I'm sticking to it. I made a pledge I was going to say President Trump out of respect for President Obama. So I'm sticking to that. And I did a show with him. He was nice to me. But, he's been a big supporter of the UFC, and when when Senator McCain was trying to put me in jail and all that kind of stuff, and I stepped away, Donald Trump hosted, not then President Trump, Donald Trump hosted at Taj Mahal, I think, or whatever casino in Atlantic City. And I have seen an increasing Trumpian side to the UFC. And it's clear, what's his name, Covington and Cody Covington and,
Masvidal.
The folks that have been going to the White House and, and my friend Tito Ortiz, who I do believe, I would say he lost his mind if he ever had one. So he didn't have one to lose, but, and so he's very connected to this administration. And I was worried because just like the New York Times editorial that's on your reading list, I believe there is a classist, an elitist prejudice against combat sports, that it's somehow seen as working class, lower class, uneducated, and the martial arts are not that, but fighting is. And I think in progressive circles and in whatever you want to call it, California, New York, the Beltway, this idea that we're better than that, and that's something those people like, I'm a little worried about that. I don't think President-elect Joe Biden seems like a guy that's going to get behind MMA, and the truth of the matter is this is a misconception that it is a politically convenient one to label this sport as deadly or dangerous or low class. The New York Times one time said, I started this sport on the outskirts of society. I started this sport on 57th and Park. And if you know New York City, that's about the nicest block that exists. The Four Seasons is across the street. I mean, it's like high-end. Tiffany's is down the street. I mean, it wasn't the outskirts of society. I did ESPN represented the foreign rights. BMG, the biggest media company in the world. It's mislabeled as this sort of, whatever you want to call it, blood sport. And yes, I take the blame. Yes, I promoted it that way. But listen, if you're a Formula One fan, you saw that horrible crash just a few days ago, right? And in WWE, Vince McMahon will never talk about this, but wrestling worldwide has 3 or 4 deaths per year, right? It's not from the fighting, it's from falling off stuff and from all the drugs they take, right? And, Cirque du Soleil has 3, 4, 5 deaths per year. Cirque du fucking Soleil. I'm sorry, Professor Kidder. I'm sorry.
No.
I swear a lot, especially when I get worked up. Cirque du Soleil is more dangerous than mixed martial arts. But who's going to get behind that as a political platform? We had at the first UFC. So I spent all my time telling people it was out of control, no rules. Wow, you're not going to believe what happens. I did do that. And I put in a press release, we'd only stop the fight if the guy surrendered or died. I did put that in a press release. I mean, it's fact. I put it in a press release. But I also had statistics saying girls, high school soccer had more concussions than the UFC because for young women who have, they don't have the neck muscle development that young men do. And unless they really work on it, they won't get it. And so when they head the ball, there's all these concussions because they can't stabilize, the skull, and then the brain goes bouncing around. But who's going to buy a pay-per-view if I go safer than girls high school soccer? Who's going to buy that? I mean, nobody's going to buy that. So I did work one angle, but the reality, the facts, the physics, the science, the economic point of view, if you take a Marxist point of view, this is an opiate for the masses, right? That's what this is. And people then jump on that and say, well, I live in the snooty town, right? And it's like some of the suburbs in Virginia near DC, right? And when I first moved here, which is 27 years ago, my wife goes, could you please not tell people what you do? Because, till we get settled in, because, it's a nice town, right? So, there's this idea that this sport, and it is a sport now, right? And it's a combination of Olympic sport. It's a combination of boxing, judo, jujitsu, taekwondo, and wrestling. And it is that. And there are no rules because you can't use the boxing rules in this. You can't put grappling and boxing together. And then you certainly can't have taekwondo. I mean, you just can't have rules that really work for all of them. And that's why we do it like this. It's to be able to mix these sports. So look, I think it's a great sport. I think it's very unpredictable. I'm knocking on wood. There's been no major injury in the UFC. And a lot of that has to do with the physics of how you punch and your stance when you're fighting. But I'll tell you, I am greatly concerned about the president-elect. I am greatly concerned that President Trump has co-opted things like Christianity, right? Like he stole Christianity. I go to church. I don't want to be associated with the Christians that back him up. He stole Christ, for Christ's sake. Now he's stealing sports. He's taking MMA away from people that like it, but don't like him. So I'm concerned about the backlash. I really am.
Yeah, no, I really want to hear. And Kyle, because I know you've done research in this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've got like 5 questions from that. I'm trying to resist trying to just get Larry David's stories, because that's the one thing that might interest me more than MMA. But I'll avoid going down that.
Yeah, don't. I mean, I'll have to come back when Professor Kidder launches a comedy and fighting class.
Yeah, I'm ready for that one. Well, I guess my first question, going back to when you were...
How would you feel if your wife ran off with Al Gore? I mean, is Al Gore not the most boring person that you've ever heard of? I mean, honest to God, if my wife ran off with Al Gore, I think I'd kill myself. Like Brad Pitt, I go, I see it.
Yeah.
Al Gore.
Al Gore, doesn't he have a nice beard now? He's looking a little cleaned up, kind of fancier guy now. All right, so my
no one thinks Al Gore is hot. No one thinks Al Gore is hot. I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yeah. So I've got a few questions. One, I'm wondering, going back to when you were first in the process of putting together the Ultimate Fighting Championship, who did you imagine the audience would be? Because I think that's one of the things about creating this new spectacle or sport is you have to have an idea that there's someone to consume it. So did you have that same idea that now many people in elite liberal circles also hold, that it's just, the conservative masses who turn up for this violence? Or who did you think would actually watch it?
Well, that's a great question. And yeah, I did. If you want to call that group, call them Yahoos, right? And I don't mean, the search engine of the tech company. I mean, Trumpians, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, I knew they would like it. Are you kidding? Cowboys, that sort of rough and tough group of folks. You talked about how the ring came from a circle of people standing around. It's called regularly the squared ring, of course, so someone has an idea that it's not actually a ring. Mm-hmm. I do know when they were trying to clean up boxing, they asked Wyatt Earp, the famous lawman, to be the ref and to come in, and they often built the ring in 2 states with the state line down the middle. So if the Wyoming cops came, they could shift over to the North Dakota side, right? So I knew there was this lawlessness, underground fight club. Yeah, I knew that was going to work. I knew that was there, right? I was really taken with Mortal Kombat back in the day, and I knew that it was super popular. And I don't know if you remember, speaking of Al Gore, Tipper was trying to put rap music out of it. She wanted those warning labels on, so people thought rap was a threat to society. McCain called me a threat to Western civilization. Video games, think about this time. I wouldn't mind going back to that when our biggest problem was a fucking video game, right? Or a rap song. That's our biggest problem. Think about that, right? What's our biggest problem now? Friggin' pandemic, civil war, right? I mean, the economy collapsing, hate, the country completely divided. Yet go back to this time, and the biggest problem is the ultimate fight and me? Really? Do I seem like, seriously. So I think, I knew there was this underground audience, tough guys, right? I knew it would appeal. There was this video game, and if you remember how the game looked, if karate guy with no shirt and the pants, the sumo guy, finish him, and so that's what the Ultimate Fight #1 looks like. Everyone wears their garb, their costume, to represent their sport or their background. So I figured I'd get the video game audience. No one had any idea how big that was back then. I figured I would get the yahoos, people that like to see other people get beat up. Well, there's quite a few of those. But I also knew that in the martial arts world, I looked at this as, the way Vince McMahon looked at wrestling. Vince McMahon's father was a wrestling promoter. His grandfather was too. But his father started buying up the big regional promotions and started to put them together. And it was Vince, as a genius marketer and entertainer, turned that into WWE, right? So he took all the regional promotions and put them into a national one. My idea was, and it was more ad hoc than as organized as the regional wrestling promotions, but after Charles beats up everybody in his dojo, Charles is walking around going, who am I going to beat up now? And so I knew I could reach every dojo, every gym, every training gym, whether it was Taekwondo or Kempo or, what, ninjutsu, whatever they were studying, I could bring all those together as a national audience. So I had the yahoos that then later turned out for Tank Abbott because he spoke to them, right? And the video game thing, I'm not sure that ever worked out because no one really caught on to, I based this on Mortal Kombat. I'm not sure I picked any of those folks up. But then I did pick up every martial arts and fighting enthusiast, right? And Betty White, the comedian, from Golden Girls, she has this great line. She goes, back in my day, we didn't have Facebook, we had phone book. Yeah. And we didn't have Facebook, we had phone book. So I had interns calling every karate, taekwondo, every school in America and going, on November 12th, we're going to see which martial art's the toughest, because it was martial art versus martial art in one. It wasn't mixed martial arts, right? Yeah, it's art versus art. So, of the three audience, I got the yahoos and I got the martial arts. I don't know the video game. I think now it's different because there is a UFC video game, but my idea somehow to connect Mortal Kombat, that didn't work. So that's how I did. But pound for pound comparison, by the way, 20 million pay-per-view homes when I did this. There's 100 million now. 20 million pay-per-view homes. You had to go get a friggin' cable box too, by the way. Like, you had to go to the cable. People don't even know where the cable office is now. Yeah. You have to go, sometimes put down a deposit, get this cable box. It was actually this big. You get this cable box and hook it up. And then after the event was over, you had to return it. That's what you had to do to see the pay-per-view. And so I'm doing on 20 million homes, the first one, 80 million, and 4, 3, 4, and 5 are hitting almost 300 million buys. So if you do a pound for pound comparison, today's universe, that's 1.5 million to 1.8 million buys today. I mean, that was phenomenal. So that showed, I knew people liked this. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. And in my controversy, I was aiming for a guy named Jerry Falwell. Because you've heard me, I've mentioned I go to church, and my mom was a Presbyterian church administrator for 40 years. I can do a little Bible thumping, right? I can quote scripture. And so I figure if I get Falwell to come out and he starts throwing verse at me, boom, I'm going to hit him back. I'm going to hit him hard. I'm going to go toe to toe with the Bible man. So that's who I was trying to get to come after me. I was trying to find someone that could come out that I knew I could take, right? And that would build up the interest in my sport, because people would probably hate Jerry Falwell too. Instead, I get a war hero senator, head of the Armed Forces Committee, who then brings in Ben Nighthorse Campbell, the US Senator from Colorado that had, I think, a gold medal in judo from the Olympics. And but how am I going to argue? The guy was a POW, and the other guy was an Olympian. How am I going to argue with these guys? And you hear how I am. That's how I was then.
Well, also, because this is we're in an academic thing where we don't want to like mess around with any, I'm going to say it, bullshit. So Campbell, what was like Senator McCain's real agenda? I've heard, with his affiliation with his wife, was he trying to protect boxing?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of it. I think there's a couple different things. There's a couple kind of conspiracy things in the UFC's history, and one is how they were kept out of New York, and how I was thrown out, and then the Fertittas were kept out.
Yeah.
And that there's a real political sort of conspiracy behind that. And I don't have a dog in that fight anymore.
Yeah.
But the other one is McCain, right? And it's the bigger issue. I think, again, going back to my rant about how 1993 was, I'll take that time over COVID and all the crap we're going through now. I think Senator McCain could come out against the UFC very safely and get quite a bit of press, right? Like, it's a fight and nobody was going, you keep free the UFC, free the UFC. He could come out and very safely label this as something we don't need and shouldn't want. And again, come back to this elitist, this is for working class folks, this is for people that aren't educated. He could come out and very safely position himself as a moralist. It wasn't, abortion, right? It was not any racial issue. It's not essentially an economic issue, but there was an economic component. I'll talk about that in a second. So he could safely get behind shutting this down with no political repercussions, right? If you come out and take a stance on abortion either way, you're going to make somebody mad. Whichever way you go, they're not going to like you. I think he could safely come out and go, this is human cockfighting. And in one interview, live TV, I'm so proud, this is maybe the best interview I did. CNN, I forget who the reporter was. He goes, Campbell, is this human cockfighting? I go, absolutely not. All the men wear pants. And they just didn't know what to do. I mean, I said it and I didn't say anything else. And that was personally.
That was a buzzword though. I got it.
Yeah, that's what it was called, right? It was human cockfighting.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't help when I did the only event in Puerto Rico that the UFC has done, that the auditorium we used was next to the National Cockfighting Arena. That was not, I didn't know that when we booked it. But I think Senator McCain's wife at the time, it's a different wife now, she was from a family that had a huge Budweiser distribution. And you may know when I did the Ultimate UFC 6, what's the hair guy, Don King, when Don King moved Mike Tyson from pay-per-view to free TV on Fox. There hadn't been a big boxing match on broadcast TV in 11 years. They were all on pay-per-view. When he moved it to the same night as our pay-per-view, that showed that the boxing industry was very worried about the UFC and was going to go out of their way. Buster Mathis Tyson fight was put on free opposite our pay-per-view. So I knew the boxing industry was not happy about this. So I think there was a boxing aspect to this. McCain was a boxing fan. I think that there was a theory that his time in a tiger cell in the tiger cage in Vietnam had made him not exactly friendly towards the martial arts. I don't know, reasonable theory. But I think the real issue that really ended up in it being pushed off TV was not John McCain, but in the venal cowardice of the cable companies that knew that their licenses, all the big company, Cablevision, Charter, Cox, all of them had license renewals within a few years. And back then, before the internet, people watched pornography on cable TV. And no one admitted it, but it was something like 40% of the revenue of cable TV, right? And so the cable industry is somewhat like a regulated industry. It's a semi-utility. So they were all worried if McCain got stirred up that he might go after pornography next. And, you know,
yeah,
to an extent, the sacrificial lamb. So they go, don't argue with the guy, give him the UFC, and then maybe he won't look at, you know, the porn,
yeah,
you know, which was real money. I mean, 40% of the cable revenue is porn. So I think that's it. I think it's connection to the boxing. I think it was an easy target. I think he may have fostered, you know, some bad memories from being locked in a tiny cage for what he was in 18 months or something, and then combined with the cable industry's, you know, desire to protect their porn money.
yeah. No, and that's huge money. But whatever happened, and who knows why, in around I think 2007, McCain was on record saying he is now he had cooled his hotness, or, you know, towards MMA, was receptive towards it. Did you have any kind of reconciliation with him? I'm curious.
No, I was invited by a few people close to the Zuffa company to stay quiet and stay out of the way while they spent a lot of money repairing that relationship, primarily through the governor of Nevada and this Nevada's two senators reaching out to their colleague from Arizona. You know, when I got friendly with Lorenzo Fertitta, I mean, he goes, you know how much money you cost me? He goes, you know, you cost me like a lot of money. And my response was, you know, I made you a lot of money too. Right. Yeah. So I think you come out ahead.
Yes. And I also think McCain helped in terms of when Trump was so vicious to his memory after he died, and to his, you know, wife, that Arizona flipped. So I gotta think that that made me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying not to talk politics, and I failed 9 times on this call alone. So.
So Kyle, and I want to bring this back up in terms of
Kyle's only got to one question, Professor. I'm not even trying to answer that.
I want to kind of circle back to your feelings of what the audience, or of what politicians or the media might use MMA as an easy target. I want to know, and you've talked about this because we haven't talked about Combate Americas yet, which you and Charles worked with, how you say that you're really good on bringing crowds together, or knowing, you know, you were doing the Yahoos and the, you know, the martial arts groups. There's this whole untapped market of the Latin America community that, yes, they love boxing. They grew up with boxing. We have 14 world champion from Mexico alone. And it's this, but yet that had never been sought after. And so I think I listened to a podcast where you said that a lot of, especially last year or up until the beginning of this year, a lot of the people tuning in on Televisa and others to Combate are new fans to MMA. And I want to bring this in, Kyle, because I feel that the fans today, and we got Gerald here, he's a young, Gerald, I think it's safe to say you're not a Yahoo. You know,
I'm from Pennsylvania, you know, just a little bit.
And also, I'm glad you gave him a history lesson on what a cable box is and all these things and how we communicated back in the old days. But Kyle and Campbell and Charles, Tanisha, I believe that I became attracted. I was always a boxing fan, but for me, MMA is the chess match, and it is something. It's intoxicating, and so for me, I don't see it as this lower level sport. I actually see it as, you know, look at me. I have my friends who are other intellectuals. We get around, we talk MMA. So, but I understand I might be in a small segment. Kyle, what do you think about the audience of today? And if,
that's it.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a tough question. I think I agree with Campbell in that it still has that. It doesn't have the stigma that it did in the 90s and early 2000s, but I think it still has a certain attachment to either working class or a conservative or right-leaning crowd. I think in some ways we're the exception. And it's not a small exception, right? It's not like it's hard to find someone from the left who likes MMA, but I don't think it's perceived in that way as an intellectual pursuit, right? So when I started doing research as a grad student in sociology, I had to do the same thing when I went to conferences of saying, well, look, I study MMA, but let me explain why I study this thing, right? Let me explain why it's an interesting intellectual pursuit, rather than simply saying, say I was studying opera and I was like, oh, I'm a sociologist studying high culture. Then you immediately like, okay, that's something that you study. So I still think it has that same, it occupies that similar space. And I found it coming from rural New York. I found it as a little kid who, my brother was a wrestler and he brought home the first UFC on a VHS tape, right? And I was also a fan of video games and martial arts movies. So I hit all three of those demographics. So it's not surprising I found my way there. And I think we all have our stories of how we got there, but I don't think it's completely shifted as much as we'd like to imagine. And I do have a follow-up question for that, but I'm going to let the other guests get to chime in too, because I don't want to take the space yet.
Wrestling needs to be acknowledged as a seminal piece of the UFC, because the Gracies were going to win everything. That's how it was. The Gracies were going to beat everybody because no one had any idea what the, boa constrictor stuff they were doing. No one could do. And then all the stand-up fighters had no idea what to do when they were taken down. And I love Hoist. Hoist is a very dear friend of mine, and Horion too. Good friends. It wasn't I didn't want them to win, but I figured if they won everything, after a while, people would stop paying for it. So the only way to counter it was to bring in, we had no weight classes, right? Bring in big Olympic college wrestlers, right? So I had Mark Schultz, who wasn't big, but he was a gold medalist. Dave Schultz's brother. Dave was tragically killed, running the DuPont team near you guys. And Dan Severin, Coleman, Mark Kerr, and these guys were big, they're like 230, and then Tito a little bit later, Tito Ortiz. And, they're big and they're muscly, they're big, and they look the part. And Jeff Blotnick becomes our announcer, and he'd won, he fought off Hodgkin's disease, won gold in the Olympics, and it was a real gentleman. He was brought in to wrestle John McCain is really why he was there, because people can say shit about me, but they can't say anything about him. I mean, he was a really good guy. So the wrestling is what created the conflict or the fighting challenge in the sport, right? And it also created something else. We talked about this perceived low-end audience, but the UFC has the most money. Their audience is more affluent than every other sport except for golf and tennis. The UFC has the highest college degree rate of any sport other than golf and tennis. Because a lot of the folks come into it because they knew an Olympic college wrestler that went to the big neck schools, right? Idaho, BYU, Arizona, and so it followed him. Now, this was a very white audience too, right? This is somewhat what sets up the Trumpian audience too. Like college wrestling is often, it's a white trash sport, right? And, it's got ancient and noble roots, the Iliad, right? I mean, that's where wrestling goes, the original Olympics. But it also became this like football, big corn-fed, big guys, right? And so I had them, and that's kind of the trajectory of the current UFC. And I say in Combate, as Professor Kidder said, Hispanic fans love the boxing. Puerto Rico, Mexico, right? Even in Argentina, you don't think of the Argentinians as boxing fans, but they're huge boxing fans. So in Combate, I had strikers that were learning how to grapple. The UFC was grapplers that learned how to strike, right? So that's why you see these kind of punches in the UFC, these coming in from, outer space and landing on the top of a guy's head. And, in Combate, you see this with a lot more head movement, right? Because I have boxers that are learning MMA, and the UFC had wrestlers learning how to punch and kick.
Tanisha.
And the UFC. I have the highest finish rate in sports. We believe we have the most exciting. Are we losing? Yeah, hang on. You guys still hear me? I'm sorry. China, I'm sorry. China, I'm so sorry. Okay. Anyway, so we say mucho más acción for Combate, much more action, right? Highest finish rate, most second round finishes. It's more fun. Smaller. Hispanic athletes tend to be smaller. I don't have a lot of heavyweights. UFC doesn't have a lot of Hispanic heavyweights. Cain Velasquez was their great hope to take over the Hispanic world. Didn't work out. Another wrestler. And I think that's what contributes to my new fans at Combate. Nielsen says 91% of my fans, Nielsen TV rating service, says 91% of my fans don't watch the UFC or Bellator. I think I'm bringing in new fans to the sport. They have no idea what I'm talking about when I say John McCain. And not just in Mexico, I mean US Hispanics. They forgot all, they don't care. You know why? Because there's real fucking problems in the world. Like a lot of people have real problems feeding their family. That's a problem, It's a real problem. Prejudice is a real problem, right? So they don't care about John McCain and 25 years ago. This is cool. It's cool again.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot what's been driving the success of the UFC. Boxing is for your dad. MMA is for you, right? So it's younger. However, they like boxing. My fans like boxing. They like to see people be punched in the face. I got that, right? Yeah. So Combate's going well.
No, and I want to get into it because I want to know when it's coming back. Hopefully soon.
March 26th.
March 26th.
March 26th.
All right, 2021. Let's just get.
I got that.
I cannot wait. That's great. And is this going to?
Wait till you see what we're going to do.
Is this? I can't wait. Tanisha, because again, you've got this specialty in fandom, and we've been talking about fans. Do you have any thoughts, or even just exploring? Because I know we only have like a half hour left, and I know I have so many questions. So go, Tanisha.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was like, shit, where do I start? There's just so much I was thinking about it over all of this stuff. But talking about
Professor, thank you, doctor. Thank you for cursing. I'm starting to feel.
Yeah, we got that going for sure. Game recognized game, most definitely. But talking about the audience and stuff, it made me just start thinking about, and the things that Kyle brought up too, when I first started getting my doctorate and I said I wanted to study sports, when I want to look at how technology, digital media, how that is impacting sports fandom, the overall sport experience and all that stuff. And it had a very, why do you want to follow sports? Like, why are you going to look at that? Like, it was almost too highbrow to like bring in sports and have an intellectual conversation. And obviously, like, we've all been proving why that's so necessary and stuff. But when I was doing that research, I was looking at that evolution of sports media consumption, right? And so looking at starting from, you know, newspapers, 1870s, to Western Union Telegram for college football. First radio broadcast was boxing, the Dundee fight, and then so on to like ESPN, to virtual reality. I've got the not Thursday night football, Wednesday afternoon football on the other screen over here on my phone. So obviously, like, there's that pattern. But at the same time, how has the audience evolved? The fan sentiment, audience behavior, and how has social media been that weird crossroads, that weird intersection into that, not only from a distribution standpoint and being able, but also from now athletes themselves, fighters themselves being branded themselves and adopting shit like Colby has, adopting stuff like Henry, or now old girl, I don't know her name. No one did until she started wearing that Proud Boy stuff, doing the fucking riots or whatever a couple weeks ago.
May we continue to not know her name.
Exactly, because I don't know, and I didn't want to get
But I will say it if
you
you
even know. Yeah, but those type of things, I think, is part of, like, that's why I love your answer talking about like who you thought your audience would be, because in 21, I think it's going to be very different as well, and how things are going to be moving forward. And that's where I'm always looking to work and where I can try and like find and get in there, because I think even today, like, Black female, 37 years old from Southern California, now living in Vegas, the things that I grew up watching and loving weren't made for me. Like, I grew up being an insane pro wrestling fan. And that's why why UFC appealed to me so much. And Andrei Arlovsky was like my first favorite, because I was like, wait, this dude got fangs? Oh shit, he's like a hairy chested hair. Like, he looked like a wrestler to me. And I was like, done, I'm in. And so there's that weird intersection of like pro wrestling fans that I think have gone into MMA, and obviously now they're seeing the paycheck, and like Cain Velasquez tried anyway. But I think, to try and get to a point and maybe a question in there, I'm thinking like how organizations now can start to internally give fans an opportunity to like tell their own story and reframe it themselves, because we're knowing now, just like you said, the layman, the mainstream audience who does not know and has mislabeled MMA. I'm the one now, as like the fan, when I go to watch sports, I hear somebody say something stupid on the bar stool next to me. I'm like, and then I'll say it and they're like, oh shit, I didn't know that. Or when there's a fight on this weekend, my friends text me, okay, what's the story? Why do I need to watch this? But it's also culturally, there's things in there too, because I remember when DC retired and he did that press conference, he's saying that one of the things that he was most proud of was that he brought the Black audience in, and he was helping he wanted that to be a part of his legacy. And I know Angela Hill has been saying, you know, similar things as well. That's the first line in her bio, first Black woman signed UFC. And to this day, yeah, my brother will be like, how come there's no Keisha? Like, why are there no Black girls fighting? Like, what's the deal? Blah, blah, blah. And it's a thing that we look for, just like why every other nation or ethnicity will have that type of support going in there. Like you're saying, Combate and the Latin community and stuff. Ireland goes wild the F out, right? Anytime that dude's name is mentioned. But how can we now start to adopt those type of things in the future? So I think those are all just things that in the future, I would like to see organizations start to recognize and market to, because when you've got BIPOC communities, we almost fend for ourselves because no one is going to talk to us. So if no one will, we'll just talk to ourselves and make our own little niche and corner in there. But I don't know if there was a question in there, but that's just 100 things I was thinking.
But you said a lot, and I don't mean the volume of it. The quality of the thoughts were very impressive, and there's a lot to pick apart in there. Not in the sense of I'm against it, in the sense I'd like to look at each of those points. But the second screen, which really represents technology, right, is a huge part of what everyone's doing, and I think there's a lot of influence and it's influencing things. You're right. The media has really driven sports. Baseball's great on the radio because it goes on for fucking ever. I mean, I love baseball. Walt Whitman was a baseball correspondent. It's a great game, goes on forever. Young people watching on their phone, right? Watching on this size screen or watching highlights of highlights.
Thank you.
ESPN's House of Highlights. It's highlights of highlights, right? And look, 1 billion Hispanics worldwide, and that's not all the soccer fans because everyone except for the US is a soccer fan. And they're watching on this, and the little ball is a itty bitty ball, teeny little ball on your phone. Yeah. But fighting on that phone is in your face. It's great. Fighting is great on the phone. And I think it's a great experience for the fan. Now, it's better on your ginormous TV, but it works very well on this. And the ability to give the fan information, as you said, when you were sitting on the bar stool or at the diner or wherever you're sitting, you've got a ton of info. That's great to deliver the fan too. They're also finding that info is going to be very helpful in getting people to gamble, right? So this idea to spread information on MMA, it's not because they want the world to be more educated. It's because they figure the fan will spend more money. I think you mentioned Connor and the national or group representation, whether it's Anita, who's an amazing person. Anita Hill's an amazing person. She's been coming to Combate since the very beginning. And Connor, I was in Dublin with Lorenzo Fertitta and Dana White, his last fight in Dublin. 11,000 drunk Irishmen pounding. And I turned to Lorenzo, I go, what are we going to do if he loses? And I said, Lorenzo, if he loses, I'm coming like under. We'll have to tunnel out. Why? Because if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, and I know this group, I'm sure they are, and if you know Joseph Campbell's work, the fighter becomes the hero. The fighter represents the group. Yeah. And let me tell you, no group responds to that better than a group that's had the shit kicked out of them. The Irish, what do the Irish and the Mexicans have in common? They've got a nasty neighbor that has dominated them for 1,000 years. So when their guy beats up the other guy, yeah, right? When I talk to the head of sports at Univision, and I go, what do you think the fans will like the best? They go, when the brown guy beats the white guy, try to do that. That's going to work the best for us. So, there's no bigger hero than the fighter, right? This goes back to Homer. When you come on and represent, and look at Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was probably the most famous person in the world. And what did he do? He went on to represent the struggle for freedom in every country that was struggling for freedom, not just Africa, everywhere. He represented everyone that was struggling for freedom. Bruce Lee, what did Bruce Lee went to Hollywood? He couldn't even get a job as a Chinese actor. They wouldn't let the Chinese guy play the Chinese guy. And so he became a symbol, not just a great fighter, but someone that championed his group. So that's really the power of, whether it's boxing or MMA, we come in to represent, but if you have heart, what's his name? Khabib. I mean, I don't know how many Dagestanians, or Chechens are in the US. I don't think that many. But he's surpassed that now. Now he represents the decent side of fighting, like the good guy. And he flipped that Irishman that you mentioned. He made him the bad guy. So whenever we win and whenever we have the power to represent a group, we go so far beyond just a fight. You become the symbol for every struggle of everyone that's struggling, right? And you don't have to win. Rocky didn't win, right? He didn't win in Rocky 1, right? And I had this guy named Tank Abbott, who we probably wouldn't like if we were all sitting with him now, but a lot of people did like him. And I don't even know if he won one fight, but he represented his group so well, those yahoos, that he became their hero, win or lose, right? This is what you were talking. This is a very important component in the fight business, finding the group and then growing that group to represent all of humanity.
Yeah.
Because once the fighter does that, they don't just represent the Irish or Black Americans or people in Zaire or people from Hong Kong. They then represent the whole world. People don't even know who Che Guevara is anymore, but they got the T-shirt, right?
Yeah.
So, and when you represent the struggle, then you do represent all of humanity. Listen,
No.
DC is a great guy. I believe that I did more to open up the UFC to Black fighters than anyone. When I did the UFC, look at UFC 1. Look at the diversity in UFC 1, right? I mean, Pat Smith, Taylor Tooley, Zane Frazier. I wanted that mix. I wanted that ultimate, feeling that it was the best in the world from everywhere, the toughest guys from everywhere. But then the UFC really went down a different path after I left, because what they realized is they had a combat sport that white guys could win. And if you've ever seen the movie The Great White Hype, which my friend Warrington Hudlin, their problem in that movie is they can't find a white guy to beat Damon Wayans, who I gave his comedy start to in New York in the Comedy Club. I didn't mention it. So, UFC realized they had a combat sport that white guys could win, and white fans were leaving boxing, right? There hadn't been a white heavyweight champion since Rocky Marciano, 1956. I don't count the Russians because I'm an American. So there hadn't been a white champion since 1956. And then all of a sudden you had all these white guys winning. And I was doing a show for BET, Black Entertainment Television, called The Iron Ring, where I went to rappers and offered them teams of MMA fighters. The thing beat the crap out of the UFC in ratings. And I don't know if you're hip hop fans, but Little John, Nelly, Ludacris, T.I. I had like really famous guys. And Floyd Mayweather, who can't sing, but he can fucking dance. And so I had them, and it's all Black fighters, right? And the show's doing great. And I'm after a guy called Kimbo Slice.
Ooh.
And I'm talking to his manager. Kimbo made his living as a security guard on porno shoots. And his manager, Icy Mike, was a porno guy. And Kimbo then used to do street fights in Florida, and people would gamble. And he would make a lot of money. And so I'm talking to Kimbo, and I'm going, and Icy Mike, do this show. I will make you the hero of heroes. I got over 1 million viewers every episode. It's BET. I'll put you on Floyd's team. I'll put you on Ludacris, whoever you want. And I'll give you $50,000. And Icy Mike is like, how much money we make from porn? $50,000. We get that a minute. And Dana offered him whatever. I think it was like $350. And I kept trying. And I said, we're going to make you a hero. You will be the star. You will represent everyone. You will break through. I go, if you go to the UFC, I fucking know those guys, you will lose because your jiu-jitsu is weak, and they will get the biggest jiu-jitsu guy they can. He's going to choke you unconscious. And I will find the weakest guy, probably a white guy, and you can kick the crap out of this guy, and I'm going to make you a hero. And he went with the UFC, and Frank Gannon, right? If you know who he fought, it was a white cop from Boston, and that's who Dana put him up against. But then when The Ultimate Fighter was on and I'm doing better ratings, that's when a lot of the Black fighters, and there were a number of guys who went from my show right to the UFC. And then of course, John Jones is an athlete you cannot deny. And then it opened up. And within 2 years of the Iron Ring, the UFC had increased 300-fold the number of fighters that went in there. because they also started to realize they got the white fans. Now maybe we need to add black fans, because black people have money. Black people buy pay-per-views. And, you know, that was really the beginning of that. There's an inherent element of racism in the UFC. And I do not publicly talk about this. It became increasingly clear with Trump's era, President Trump's era. And I think it's still there. You know, I got to say, it kind of works for me the opposite way. My first website, this is before I met Charles, it said, you know, it said in English, if you don't speak Spanish, click here. And then just for a very short time, when you click there, it said, fuck you, learn Spanish. And then, you know, my board, someone on my board saw it and said, maybe advertisers won't like that, by the way. But that was sort of our mentality, right? It's like Spanish first, Hispanic first. You're a second-class citizen in your own friggin' country. We're not going to do that to you. You are our fan. You're the fan we want. So we put the group that considered themselves second class, we put them in first class. And you kind of make the other people sit and coach and then put your main audience in first class. And that's a good business strategy. And that's what the UFC did. I flipped that, all right? And then in Mexico, all this doesn't matter anyway, because Mexico knows it's a second-class country compared to the US. I mean, the dynamics of combate as you go country versus country become extraordinarily interesting and complex, because culture is interesting and complex. When I go to Spain, it doesn't even matter at all. So
it's fascinating.
I don't know. Was there an answer?
Yeah.
Doctor, you said, is there a question in what you said? I don't know if there's an answer in anything I say.
We're getting multiple answers. And it's the hair. Okay, it's not the cage is the Spanish word. It's the hair, Joe, or the
La jaula. La jaula.
La.
Yeah.
Laola. That's what you call it.
La
Not
jaula.
La jaula. La jaula.
See, the cage sounds to be, I mean, it's a good place for LFA, and Invicta is getting thrown out. I mean, it's good for certain promotions, but for me, that was not the gig. They are buying your company for $35,000 a show.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not a good deal. If you do not aspire to be, you know, a world-class event and have global reach and turn yourself into a billion-dollar company, and I do, by the way, then the Fight Pass deal is probably pretty comforting, right? You know, you're going to get the money, you're going to get the production paid, you get a little cash. You've, in essence, as a promoter, created a job for yourself, doing something you love, and not only are owned by the UFC, pennies on your dollar, you also become a feeder system for the UFC, because most of them all have the UFC out clause. LFA contracts only protect the fighters if, you know, the UFC doesn't want them, or only protect the LFA if the UFC doesn't want them.
So
smart. Lawrence Epstein is super smart. You know, Dana's a great promoter. Lawrence is very, very smart, and so was Lorenzo. And thankfully, Ari Emanuel's pretty much left them alone.
All right. I love that. And so Campbell, real quickly, in the stateside, how do you watch Combate, just to let everyone know?
Well, our deal was with Univision, which is a broadcast network, which means it's on for free. And because it's broadcast, every TV home in America gets it. If you have a cable package, it must be on your cable package. Jorge Ramos, you know, to me, is a national hero. He was thrown out of the White House, Trump's White House press room. He's Walter Cronkite of Spanish. It is an honor to be on the same network as he is. I don't want to announce anything here, but the deal ends December 31st. And again, I'm talking to a lot of folks. So this year, you would have seen us on Univision. You would have seen us on Access in English, and that will change as well. We have been doing best ofs on the air, and our best ofs on TUDN, TUDN, which is Televisa Univision Deportes Network, is re-airing our shows when we've recut them, and the ratings are as good as they were Q1 when we were live. So, and of course our YouTube channel.
YouTube
You go to
channel.
the YouTube channel, and
The Zone, because I'm curious. I had to bring that up because I'm very curious what's going on with them.
If you know who John Skipper is, very famous sports guy, really created ESPN as we think about it, Sports Center and everything. And he's a very good guy, and he would be great on this panel because he's very erudite. He never curses, very polite, came from North Carolina, well educated, reads the classics. One of those sort of Southern charming, gentlemen, kind of the opposite of me, by the way, like the opposite of me. And so we've been talking back and forth, and he wants Combate's rights next year. And he wrote to me, he goes, Combate is hot and DAZN is a hot mess. That was his last text to me.
That's, yeah.
Len Blavatnik's pouring more money in. He's going to be up to $1 billion he's invested personally. I don't think what they're doing is wrong. I think the problem is there's just not that many sports to get. The media rights on sports are locked up. So the only thing he could do was super overpay for boxing. And then when COVID hit, the AJ fights and the Canelo fights, and that all just tanked.
Yeah.
So they don't have any content that people spend $9.99 on. So
a month, yes. Because I just got my bill, and I'm like, oh, I'm still paying for my DAZN. But if Combat, I'm probably not the typical person. But yeah, so I was kind of curious because, but they are still getting money from that Ukrainian oligarch. I forgot, how do you say his name?
But he's Russian, Len Blavatnik. He might have been born in the Ukraine, but he made his billions in Russia. And lives in London, and he created Performa, which was the stats company for all the gambling companies, and owned a huge part of Universal Music Group. That's what he sold off and put another $400 million into DAZN. He's an interesting guy. Anyway, it points to the value of live sports. It points to what people will pay for, right, in programming. The doctor was talking about, how media, new technology impacts all this. Certainly streaming is maybe the most dramatic example of that, certainly from an economic point of view. And I like Skipper. He's a good guy. He's got his work cut out for him. There's no sports to buy.
Hey, we always want to see it come back. That's another one of those narratives that we want to see.
I think that's really American, by the way. I'm not sure everyone loves a comeback. We really do in this country. We really do here.
We do. We support. No, it is interesting. Because I've been told that we really we're also very overly happy, and we don't really. We should also enjoy a good tragedy sometimes, but I don't know. That's one thing I like about sports. Look at what happened with Mike Tyson, in terms of this person. I think that pay-per-view done by Tiller, which is a new social media, I guess, like TikTok. It made they're saying over 1 million pay-per-view buys. And what I think is interesting, and Tanisha, you got to come up to this, because as kind of the fight nerds, a lot of people were giving us shit because we were watching, because it's older fighters. This is not appropriate.
I geeked out. I gave no shits. That was awesome. And it looked great from a production standpoint. I was like, yo, this set looks amazing. I could have done without the rappers I don't know, but other than Snoop and that great jacket he wore, because I have that CD cover still. But I guess I was wondering, I guess like, yeah, that's who their audience is, or they're bringing out cats I don't even know, doing like full album songs. I was like, why is it 9 minutes and this guy's still up here? But no, I loved it. But yeah, we did get a lot of shit. Like when that first came out originally, when it was going to be in September in LA, I wanted to go. I was like, I'll wear a spacesuit just to go if it means I could sit in there, and see that live. But I thought it was fantastic.
And I think that what you said, Campbell, sexy, in terms of what people liked about it is that they could tell like they liked the production. I know that you learned smoke is not pretty well, especially if a fighter has asthma. But but I thought I think that was the UFC.
And 5,000 feet altitude. We were in Denver. We're in the Mile High City. And Jane Fraser had asthma. And I'm going, more smoke. It looked really cool. But no, the guy came into the octagon going, ah, ah.
I know.
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was a tough one.
But it shows because a lot of people said that fight is a spectacle. I mean, we all knew there was going to be no winner. We knew that. But I think what we like, talking about comeback, and a lot of my students, Gerald, you weren't my student, but they only know Mike Tyson now. But we've been through it with him, Tanisha, and Kyle, where we've seen the fall. And so to see him also, I think this would have been it was 1997, I think was the Holyfield fight we all talk about with the ear. And my students, when I tell them about that and I show them that, because they just can't believe it, because they only know Mike Tyson as the guy from The Hangover or Mike Tyson mystery cartoon. And that for me, I love seeing Tyson in that moment. The third act of a fighter, Campbell, this, not always good. It's actually more typical to see the Joe Louis, the Sonny Liston, unfortunately, where, the brain trauma, financial situations are not good. And that's what I saw when I watched it, and happily paid $49.95. So it's interesting that people were wondering how that pay-per-view was going. Oh, and I think people were kind of being dismissive, and it reminded me of UFC 1 and how people, that was such a spectacular, underdog success. What were your thoughts?
It's a really good comparison. In fact, one of the MMA journalists that I despise, and when I say one, I mean them all, and the guy that writes for The Athletic, he's a very good writer. He's a good journalist, but he said, spectacle isn't all bad or something like that. And I was like, yeah, no shit. Spectacle isn't all bad. Come on. Look, do the best teams end up in the Super Bowl? Is the Super Bowl the best game of football you're going to see that year? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but it's a friggin' spectacle, right? Yeah. And it was a spectacle. I think there was a lot of things going on with this. One is everybody likes the UFC, but we were like, the UFC is the only good thing on in the fight game right now, right? The boxing matchups are generally not that good, and it's not the folks we really want to see. Scott Coker's a nice man, but Bellator is a fucking snore. It's just
I was going to ask you what you thought.
Just a snore. I'm sorry. And it had, the ratings are down, and I'm kicking the shit out of it, and it is what it is. So I think it's like the UFC is the only game in town, and then you have this other spectacle, and which wasn't Logan Paul? It's the other one. I know Logan.
Jake
Paul.
Yeah. So look, don't underestimate young people and their fandom on YouTube. Because he really had, if they did 1 million buys, I half them were his. That's my guess, maybe more. But you've also got Mike Tyson, who, after Muhammad Ali, is the most famous boxer, I think. And they're so different. They're very different guys, and they represent very different things. But Mike Tyson at 52 or 53 is, as I said at the top, he's still so scary. He just scares me. He just, you met, I don't know, I'm older than all of you. When Tyson would come to a weigh-in and the other boxer would be there in a three-piece suit and, you know, and all this kind of, the Apollo Creed kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Tyson comes out in the trunks with a towel over his head, barefoot. And he comes to the weigh-in like that. And he walks in, and everybody goes, oh, fuck. This is, who can beat this guy? And I want to say something, whatever, people have said to me, I get people to like them. They said that's actually how I work as a promoter. And I think it's worked for me in Combate because I've reached out to a group of people don't reach out to. And I go in the audience, literally. And my board makes me travel with an armed guard in a bulletproof vehicle in Mexico. And I leave the guard behind and I go out in the audience. I think Charles has seen evidence of this in the US. I just like people and I like being with people. And I think I'm a kind of a good person. So what I'm about to say, you may not like. So keep in mind the good part of people liking me part while I say this. Tyson biting off Holyfield's ear, I think is the most brilliant thing I've seen in the fight game because he was going to lose. And a killer like him can't lose. You can have loss and then you write it up. He got inside and Tyson didn't know what to do when he got inside. But he was losing and he was losing to Holyfield, who is a good guy. And he bit off the ear and he gets disqualified. But he goes from killer status to monster status. Fucking cannibal. He'll kill you. He'll bite your face off. Mike Tyson is so smart. He's not an educated man, but he's a really smart man. And I think he understands boxing as well as anyone has ever understood that sport from the inside and from the outside. And he's fairly articulate. You know, what do we have between the seven of us? We've got 85, 100 years of college between all of us. I think it might go to 7th grade. And yet this guy can clearly articulate what the sport is about. He's really, really smart. And biting that ear off, that was huge. That was huge. He went no rules. There are no rules. There's only Mike Tyson's rules. And he left. People were more scared of him after that. Yeah. More scared. So you can hate me. You can say that's terrible for the sport. Boxing purists will hate that. It was, do you know the story of the Gordian knot? You know, Alexander the Great and the Gordian knot? No. He encounters, he's 19 years old, conquering the world. He's in wherever he is, some part of Turkey that's named something else. And they bring out this elaborate knot. It's this cord and it's been tied in 1,000 different knots. And it's, you know, half the size of a house. And they bring it out and they go, well, if you're so great, and you know he was great because in the ancient days, you didn't get a nickname, right? Like nicknames are new. John the Baptist and Alexander the Great, right? I mean, you didn't get a nickname. So they go, you're so great, untie this knot. And he goes, no problem. And he took out his sword and he cut it in half. And that's what Tyson did when he bit that ear. He goes, I'll untie your fucking knot. Nobody beats me. And he bit off the ear. It was genius.
Campbell, you know, it's interesting because he had to have taken out the mouth guard. It wasn't like this spontaneous thing, you know. So it's
think about that. You're fighting that guy, and he does that.
Yeah.
I mean,
nice.
Where do you go from there? Bring me some ear muffs. I need the ear muffs to keep fighting. China, I apologize. I don't know if you probably think that's a horrible thing. To the whole nation, I apologize. We're good people here. We don't bite people's ears.
It's actually a very positive and you know, an accolade to Tyson, and you know that he manifested his persona, and you know, again this third act of becoming the self-deprecating person who put on his one-man shows and showing his cerebral side. Brilliant. And then now we have the Tyson Marijuana Ranch, and you know, so it's I'm interested in terms of watching where it goes, and I'm just glad to see this. It's an upward trajectory.
Yes.
And like
Don King charged him $40,000 a month for towels.
towels. Wow.
Actually, you know, we
That's
talked a little bit. Andrew Yang wants to bring the Muhammad Ali Act to cover MMA. No one has ever been convicted of the Muhammad Ali Act, right?
Yeah.
Ever. So that's more useless politics. Like, let's use another act that never did anything and cover this other sport, but we can act like we did something. So that's stupid or venal. And Tyson got charged $40,000 for towels. You know, don't talk to me about the Muhammad Ali Act. Go figure out who Muhammad Ali is and what he stood for. But, you know, we don't teach our sport to figure out if you're a bad guy, you should pay for being a bad guy. You know, you put people in harm's way, you steal money from them.
What Andrew Yang being, you know, you see him, you're friends with him, you say, or you know him. What changes would you like if him or someone else comes aboard and wants to do, you know, more pro fighter regulation?
Professor, let me see if I understand the question. What changes to a business that I benefit greatly from because of its loose regulations do I want? Is that the question?
Yes, and I understand that is a moot or an okay. Then you're saying, but why are you positive towards Andrew Yang? Because he has come out very, you know, he is anti-exploitation.
Because I'm a lefty. I went to Berkeley. I mean, I agree with him. We have pay parity. We're the only MMA organization that has pay parity across the genders. I'm working on a project with a transgender fighter that we're going to give a fight to
Really?
in the early spring. Yeah, and I got in a lot of trouble by saying I was going to do that with Fallon Fox a few years ago. I think we knew each other then, didn't we, Charles? When I was talking to Fallon. So we're gonna have a transgender fighter, pay parity through the genders. I don't think I need to talk about the diversity of my company, since like I have to figure out ways to keep white people out, right, without breaking the Constitution. Here's how I go. Do you speak Spanish? No, but I could learn. I could get that app on my phone and learn how to speak Spanish. Yeah, okay, we'll call you. You know, so I've got a very diverse audience. I got a very diverse group of athletes. I have gender pay parity. I support LGBT rights. I'm doing a show with a transgender fighter. Yeah. I am a progressive fight promoter, and I may be the only one.
Yeah.
So if I could ask a question.
I mean, what do I? Oh no.
So
yeah,
what?
Go ahead.
Do you foresee a compromise between someone like yourself and Andrew Yang? And do you see a compromise between, or somewhere that Dana White can meet Andrew Yang on things like that? What do you think will happen if he gets the position he wants?
That's a good question, and I can answer it because it won't put me in a position that someone could, you know, repeat my words back to me later to my disadvantage. So the real issue is what just went on in California with Uber and DoorDash. You know, do you treat the people that you pay as independent contractors or as employees, right? I think that's the real issue here. And I have fighters that fight 2 or 3 times a year. I think I can make a pretty solid case they are not employees, right? That they are independent contractors. We do, you know, and, you know, I've done things like when fighters been hurt in other fight promotions, I don't want to name names, but Titan, you fucking schmucks, they don't have insurance for their fighters. I have paid medical bills of fighters in Titan because they were in Florida and, you know, and I knew them. So, you know, we do okay by our fighters, but they're not employees, and it would really hurt me to classify 90 independent contractors as employees. It really would. The UFC probably could stand that financially. They probably could do that. Combate's, you know, development in our revenue that we generate now, that'd be very hard for me to do. And that's the issue for us. You know, do you want to set a pay scale? Okay, I mean, they talk, you know, other sports have a pay scale. We could have a minimum. It's going to hurt the LFAs. It's going to hurt the Titans. It's going to hurt the Invictas. You know, and I mean, sometimes that's the problem with government regulations. They go after Facebook and they end up hurting Schmuckbook because Schmuckbook is not near as big, right? And so I don't want to dodge anything, and I want to do the right thing. Everybody gets paid and everybody's insured, and we help. One of our fighters came to me, said, Campbell, my family's trying to buy a taco truck, and would you make us a low cost loan? It's Ricky. Charles, you're nodding, right?
Yeah. I remember
I'll
this.
tell you what, I'll make you the low cost loan, 0%, and I will pay you if you put my name on the truck. And so I got the family up and running. Biggest mistake of my life, not from a human point of view, but Ricky never made weight again after his family got the taco truck. Because he's in the taco truck eating the damn tacos. So we try to do the right thing. We do try to help the fighters, but I can't make them employees at this stage in the company's development. I can't. I'm looking at 15 to 20 million in revenue, you know, last year. Hope to do better next year. I can't hire 90 people with that size revenue. I can't. The UFC's, what's their revenue now? It's 1.4 billion.
Murky, but lots.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Andrew Yang was looking at pro wrestling as well, because they're independent contractors too. So it wasn't just even
Actually, he should. Actually,
They go on TV every week.
multiple times too. Yeah. And then because there are other deals, you know, the way that McMahon's took away their Twitch licenses and all that other IP and stuff that they want to do on the side. So yeah, that's I know Yang had been very vocal about that industry as well. A lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm. And Campbell, you, I'm curious, are you allowed, a fighter allowed to have sponsorship on their uniform?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I should have thought to say, because that points to my good guyism. I hate the way the regional companies have the sponsorship. It's ugly. I'm a very visual person. As I said, I like art. I started as a photographer. I like how things look. We said, give us your sponsor logos. We will make the shorts for you, and we'll have our designer design them. And don't hang that ghetto looking, you know, thing in the
Banner.
background, you know, that makes you look bad. It makes your sponsors look bad. We'll create the banner for you, and I'll have our logo, and I'll have the TV network's logo, and that's what we did. And we helped them sell sponsorships. No, that's not. You know, when fighters are making, you know, $5,000 from that, that's like real money for them, right? That offsets the training. And, you know, I didn't want to take that away, but I couldn't look at it. I mean, it was so ugly. And then you remember in Rocky where he's got, what is it, the meat company? But, you know, I mean, some of the sponsors are a little sketchy, you know, especially new fighters. So I thought at least let's make it look good.
I think it's great. And for me, that's fighting. You think of the shorts, you know, that the boxing shorts and how they're all specialized. And I actually love it when the guys bling out, you know, and wear like all diamonds and jewels for those. But in terms of, you know, I really enjoy having individual, you know, I guess uniforms or whatever with the sponsors because it's different. And I enjoy like watching, you know, when I'm watching them grapple, I like reading their butt to see, you know, what's the next CBD oil I should be trying out. And no, but I'm glad you're keeping that with the sport. It's for me, it's an interesting part of it, and they make money.
And they make money, yeah. And but look, I love MMA. My wife says the only sport I love is the one I created. I like baseball a lot. I like boxing. But I love MMA. But I have to say, in terms of entrances, showbiz, boxing and WWE are so far ahead of MMA. And that doesn't mean we go wrestling style, right? But there's a showmanship missing in so much of MMA. And look at Connor. And
Oh, when he had Sinead O'Connor.
when I was in Dublin with the 11,000
Oh.
Irishmen, and they're playing The Rising, and
Yes.
but it's not just him. I mean, even Khabib, who he's the GSP of showmanship, right? Yeah. Very honorable. But the fucking hat, he's got the hat. The hat is great. It makes him a foreign person from an exotic country that stands up for his belief. I mean, the hat was great. I just so often, I want all of them to just kind of perk up. Ronda Rousey, who I think I brought more fans into MMA than anyone because I started it. So I think all the fans are my fans. But I think Ronda did so much to bring in new fans because she was a blondie, she was an Olympian, and she did this interview where she said, the only problem I had in that fight was my sports bra was coming off. And I know and pun firmly intended, Ronda proved it wasn't cockfighting, right? It's way not cockfighting. So I think there's some of these fighters that break through, and it's showmanship, to an extent that helps them to do it.
Yeah.
Tyson was, he was a showman in his towel over the head, barefoot, I will bite your ear off way. But it's still a show.
Yeah.
Right? It's still a show. I'm watching that show. We all watch that show. Right? He's 53, whatever he is.
Yeah.
I do want to see more showmanship.
So can we expect that from Kabate? I mean, maybe not in COVID times, but if you want to bring more music and things, I'm all for that. I'll be tuning in.
We're definitely going to do more music because you've seen the reggaeton has become such a hot genre around the world, and Bad Bunny is now the most downloaded artist in the world. And I think that it's very hard to find music in Hispanic culture that works across Hispanic culture because, like, if you do norteño music, which is Mexican cowboy music, a friend of mine, because you have to be drunk to enjoy that kind of music, right? So if you play that, someone from Cuba or Haiti, the Afro-Centro, rhythms and they don't like cowboy music. That's not going to work for them. But reggaeton has gone around the world. So we are going to see more music. I've got a set that I think is pretty cool because I'm trying to figure out what to do with the entrances. But I love Combate for so many reasons. One is Hispanic culture is much older than most Americans realize, right? They have pyramids. They were 1,000 years. And the Aztecs found them and thought the gods built them. It was the pre-Aztecs that built them. The Aztecs fucking found them. They thought gods built them, right? So you got this ancient culture that has nothing to do with Europe. They had their own pyramids. I mean, it's tremendous, the culture. But when you try to go, around the globe now, there's a saying, English is the language that unites. And my friends in China, this is English. And apparently you speak it because otherwise you wouldn't have stayed on this long. So English around the world, it's the international language. And so Mandarin is number one. Yay, China. English is number 3. Spanish is number 2. It's between English and Mandarin. But there's a saying in Spanish-speaking countries, English is the language that unites and Spanish is the language that divides. Because people pick up on, there's a word that means cockroach and vagina, depending which country you're in, right? And then if you're from, so you make that mistake, that's a pretty big mistake. And if you're from Spain and you do the th, like the name Lorenzo in Castilian Spanish is Lorenzo, right? And if you do that crap in Mexico, someone will beat you up for Lorenzo, right? So it's such a cultural difference. But for whatever reason, reggaeton, which is really just hip hop with kind of a Spanish beat and flavor is taking over the whole world. You know, it really is. And, you know, I think that's going to be an important part of our show. But the problem I have with a lot of my athletes is it's a very respectful, traditional culture. And some cultures, Donald Trump, big mouth, big presentation, full of crap, right? You know, but that works. The NBA, tremendous athletes that can talk and know how to act and get attention, right? Tremendous. But Mexico and some of the other Latin American countries, it's not about, you know, it's more Asian almost in a way. You know, Julio Cesar Chavez is a great boxer, but he's a quiet, respectful man. Oscar de la Hoya is wearing pantyhose and sniffing his body weight in cocaine and running around and yelling and screaming. I mean, he's the American and Chavez is the Mexican. You know, so I have a cultural problem in that there's a lot of people that are not, you know, they go, when you lose, say little.
Yeah.
When you win, say less. You know,
So
that's not how I think. I say more, and when you say more, say even more, right? That's me.
no, that's interesting that is in these cultural differences in terms of eliciting reaction or maybe I guess it's attention or whatnot for that. You know, they talk about the Japanese crowds are very silent because yeah.
You know, I was in Verizon a few years ago, and it's like, oh, like that's loud, that's out of control, right? That's when the crowd is out. And when I lived there, I go to baseball games. It was
But it is interesting now with no crowds. We're all, you know, we all kind of make up the global kind of connection. I was talking to Tanisha, and I think maybe Charles as well about. I'm kind of glad when I see someone I know, like Julie Kedzie, who I think you know, she's at Invicta because she comes, you know, as a professor of writing herself. She comes to the show or the class here, and I'm like, oh, I know her. She's my friend. I'm watching it with her, and I love that there's no crowd because I feel more connected to the action going on there. And maybe it's also because I don't have FOMO. I'm not like, and I know what that is, Gerald, because it's fear of missing out. I am learning from the young ones.
Later.
But that, you know, that I don't get to be in Vegas or be in these great fights, you know, especially like a huge McGregor Mayweather or Mayweather anything, you know, I don't have that kind of money. And I love that no one has that money right now. I'm curious. We were told that maybe like the UAE is going to give some people some front row tickets at Fight Island down the road. But I like it that it's just, you know, I make up that crowd. So it'll be interesting to see how like Combate is when the crowd is coming through.
I agree. I like hearing the corners.
Yes.
Right? I like the intimacy of how this is now. And I feel it's very intimate. I feel I'm really there in a way, you know, I've been to a lot of live fights. There's something about this new kind of intimacy I like a lot. However, I didn't go to Floyd Mayweather. I went to Mayweather Pacquiao. And when I saw Floyd, after that, I asked him for my money back, by the way, because I said, that wasn't the fight of the century, by the way. I mean, you're an amazing boxer, but that, by the way, that was not a fight. That was not the fight of the century. Can I have my 2,000 back, please? But when you go, and we've all been to sporting events, and you know, maybe you've been to big events, maybe you've been to the World Series or the Super Bowl or Formula One Grand Prix, you know, big events, and there's this feeling, right? You're at something, and it's cool, and it's shared humanity, and you're there, and it's an event. It can be a concert too, right? If it's, you know, whatever, first week at Hamilton, or you know, whatever you go to.
Yeah.
But a fight is different because we go back to Homer and we go back to the damn Bible, because two people are going to fight. and we don't know what's going to happen, right? And at the end of the game, it's not 7-0, it's a fight. And that feeling that we have gone back to whatever, the Coliseum, or whatever it is that taps into this racial memory, or our subconscious, or whatever Jungian, Joseph Campbellian thing is happening.
Yeah.
There's this feeling when you're there. And boy, did I feel it. UFC 1 in that first fight when Taylor Tooley got his teeth kicked out. I'm like, what have I done? But there's this feeling of,
Yeah.
what's going to happen? I mean, I don't really want to say this, but I want to say, what if someone dies? Right? I mean, it's a fight. What if someone, what if he really, you know, and it's just that feeling when you're in the room that's very different. And I go half in the room and half in the TV truck, right? Because it's a TV product. I want to see what my show looks like. And the TV truck is its own nonsense, because fights are breaking out in there all the time, because that TV truck is an intense environment.
Yeah.
Live TV is its own thing. It's an adrenaline rush from start to finish. But then when you go back into the room, it's very,
Yeah.
there's something about a live fight. It's adrenaline.
No, it's like
really what it is.
a friend of ours, Josh Rosenblatt, he's a writer. He wrote a book called Why We Fight, and he called it a self-transcendent experience when you are together. Oh, Tanisha has to run. Thank you. And I want to leave it
here. Going 18 hours at this.
We're hitting the Titanic stretch.
The entire semester in one.
I know. This is going to be the full course. Donna,
I warned you.
But no, so Tanisha, we probably will wrap up, but if you have to get off.
Yeah, my phone won't stop ringing now, like stupid things. I'm like, why? Leave me alone.
Students. But self-transcendent.
It was a joy and a pleasure and an honor to serve on this panel with you, or whatever it is we're doing. I don't really.
Whatever we're doing, for sure. Thank you, Campbell, for your time. Sincerely appreciate it.
Please reach out to me. Nancy has my contact info. I know Charles does too. I would love to connect with you and stay in touch. And if we do go back to live shows, all of you, and you will be a very honored guest at a Combate show.
Nice, thank you. Absolutely, we'll do. I'll follow up and connect. And good to see everybody too.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you again.
Wait, people stay on real quick. But Tisha, if you're leaving, I just want to thank Campbell. Are you getting off? Okay, she's getting off. But Campbell, just before you go, I want to thank you so much for doing this. But I thought you really brought it back to a great part. I'm glad you brought back to kind of the humanity of combat sports, of fighting. In that you're right there when you watch it, because I do believe, yes, it's about the fighters, two people in the ring, the coaches, the trainers, but it's also the audience is part of the whole act, of the whole thing. You go back to Cain and Abel. I don't know if anyone was watching, but in Homer, the Iliad, there is a prize fight. The prize for the winner was I believe it was a mule, and the loser got a cup. But everyone watched. And one thing that was interesting is that, yes, there's this brutal, and in Homer, they have blood and he doesn't say adrenaline, but you could tell that that's expressed through his prose. There's the moment when he picks up the fighter, the winner, and helps carry him out. And I also think that there is something incomplete when we have a fight. There's also the end when there is a winner, and hopefully a gracious winner and a gracious loser. And I believe it's almost like the individual becomes we, and we are all together experiencing something. And so you're right. I would love to see a fight. I am just doing my quarantine. I can get by.
That was beautifully expressed, but you're doing the right thing. May I tell you an anecdote that speaks to that? This was written about in the LA Times. I think, Charles, this was after you. We had a fighter named John Castaneda, who's fighting for the UFC now, and got into Stanford, but his parents didn't have enough money for Stanford. So he went to the University of Minnesota, right? on scholarships. So smart guy, right? And tough guy, good look. He's got, it's yeah, I didn't like losing him. Bilingual, good looking, smart, good fighter. I could do a lot with that. But he's got a fight, and we lost a fighter for this particular fight. It wasn't a championship fight. It wasn't particularly a big fight, but I called John and I said, you know, would you step in? I mean, this is going to be a good fight, 135. And, you know, if you could do it on short notice, I'd appreciate it. And you pick up a little money, and we'll do a whole story on you taking it on short notice, you know, old school style, pre-COVID short notice, by the way, which was not as regular as now. So John says, sure, I'll do it. I'm pretty much in training. You probably can, you know, step into weight pretty quickly. So he comes out, and I forget who he was fighting. It wasn't, wasn't anyone that I remembered, but and John's really good. First round, the guy is tearing into John. I mean, he is hitting John. He is kicking John. He's throwing John to the ground. And John's going like, whoa, what the fuck is happening? And go back and, you know, second round, and I know the looks on fighters' faces pretty well. And John's going to go, you know what? I didn't come out here for a beating.
We lost him.
Hope not. I want to know the end of the story.
Me too.
Came to let me get my head back on this. And then so I go in, and the ref's getting ready to raise John's hand, right, in victory. And John leans over to me. He goes, hey, Campbell, I heard at the weigh-in my opponent's having real money trouble. He's got 2 little kids. Would you give him my win money, and I'll just take my show money?
Wow.
You know, I know a lot of charitable people. There's a lot of people that are very charitable, but I have never, ever met anyone that got beaten up by someone and then gave them money. You know, and I just thought that speaks to the fighter, dignity, humanism of the fighter. John in particular, John's a good guy, but I mean, just as you said, you know, and we all saw the picture of John Jones and the Norwegian
Alexander
both
Gustafsson
in the hospital with their arms around
Right.
each other. Yeah, thank you. And you know, and that's what makes this sport great. You know.
Gotti Ward or Gotti versus Ward, Arturo Gotti and Mickey Ward, they're famous in the hospital together after just mauling each other, 3 different times. It's so true, Campbell. And, you know, so I am so thankful, you know, please, I only got to about half of the questions that I gave you. So
I thought you got one. I only really heard the one.
I know. So I would love it if you would come back and, you know, also, you know, starting a new semester, you know, that because we're at the end of this one, I would love it perhaps when we show them UFC 1, which many of my students, I think that they were born in 2002. So it's not as ancient as the Iliad or the Bible, but for them watching it, it is amazing because some of them have heard about it. Some of them it's for their first time, and it's a great response to do it.
It also really truly ranks as maybe one of the worst TV commentaries in sport ever. By the way, I mean I think it really is the worst.
Well, not Kathy Long, as I told you. How did you?
No, I love.
Did we? I hope we catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's lagging pretty bad. When you were telling the story of the fighter pay of being the mule and the loser getting, what was it, a rock?
No,
I've been in academia too long. I immediately think about whether that's good fighter pay and how that ranks with what you get now.
I know. It's so.
How does a mule compare to $1,000?
Kind of like win money versus show.
Right,
I guess,
right.
Yeah.
You know, I think the mule you'd want the mule, and
Yeah.
two-handled cup, which I think is interesting because you think of that as a trophy, right?
Yeah.
but oh,
Oh, there you go.
yeah, Campbell.
All right. I'm going to try switching spots. Not that we need to go on so much longer.
No, but we want to hear the end. Well, Kathy Long, because
We love her.
yes, and she was wonderful. And I brought that up because in terms of having a female Playboy, she was a Playboy Boy Color commentator back then. I mean, that in the 90s, we're still, you know, trying to break through for women. You put Juliana Pena, which you worked with her and Combate, and she's still with Combate. But that is extraordinary. And yes, you are a progressive in many words. But the other person, who was the other person who was the commentator who called it Ultimate Fighting Challenge?
Bill Superfoot Wallace. Yeah, worse than that. So, Gerald, I'm going to tell you something. You're going to have trouble believing it, but back then you took a piece of paper, a piece of paper, and then either with a typewriter or a pen, you inscribed it with ink. I don't know if you can imagine this. And then you folded it, you put it in an envelope, and you put these government document stamps on it, and then you put that down, and then you sent it through a government agency, then it traveled across the country. So it took a week, right? I mean, there was no fast way to send messages. You know, there was no fax, right? And so Bill Wallace took my money, took the job, and wrote a letter about how bad the UFC was and mailed it before he did the show. And it got to Black Belt magazine and came out. And there were things, Gerald, also magazines. They were like printed paper things. And that's how people read stuff. And so it came out like 2 days, we were at the Saturday, so it came out like on the Tuesday. So he wrote the article about how bad we were probably 3 weeks before the show.
Jesus.
Because they needed time to print it. He needed time to mail it. It came out the week after the show. And I just got,
And he had never used an earpiece, which I know, Charles, you use them all the time. And the first time was on air for UFC 1. I don't know the technical term, but it caught him off guard.
Well, look, beginner mistake, or, maybe I should have rehearsed him more, whatever. I'll take the criticism on that. But don't burp on air, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think that's a pretty clear rule, right? Burp is not good on air.
There's actually a button you push if you have to cough or sneeze or anything like that mutes you temporarily. Yeah, right near the producer.
Absolutely. Or you could turn your head, Charles. I mean, you could go like this.
And didn't he even excuse himself? That's he got attention.
Yeah.
But
right.
Campbell, you had to set the bar there, I think. And so for me, that's genius. Because for me, I love like hearing these stories and, the fact that you announced the show the wrong name, it's a lesson for students, that sometimes there's a rough draft, if you want to say, and then you go on from there. No, and I thank you for sharing these stories because I've watched that so many times now, and it doesn't get old. It doesn't get old.
No, it doesn't get old again. Sometimes I'm literally still embarrassed when I see, particularly the commentary. But look, we had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, one of the reasons I brought in Joe Rogan is as a comedian, he's used to hecklers and, very spontaneous. And we had no idea what was going to happen. I knew a comedian and he was a tough guy comedian, right? Like South Boston, tough guy comedian. And I knew that he could talk and fill in, we sometimes literally ran out of fighters. I forget, was it 5? Everybody was hurt. Because the tournaments, they're hard.
Yeah.
And we had one guy left. It was Steve Janum. He ended up winning. And they go, where? He goes, well, he lives in Oklahoma and he figured you weren't going to use him. So he's gone to the parking lot and he's getting changed and he's going to drive home. And I literally had to run out to the parking lot and go, Steve, come on, man, buckle up, let's go. You're in. And they're stalling until he comes back in and puts on, his shorts and goes back out. So we literally, we didn't know how it was going to go. If I could make a tiny suggestion for something for people to look at besides my awful number one is in UFC 7, when Marco Huas fights the polar bear. I believe Paul Varlan's. I believe that's the first fight that you could classify as MMA, because Marco Huas he's doing boxing punches. He's obviously a great jiu-jitsu guy, and he's doing Muay Thai kicks, and it's the kicks that chop down Paul Varlan's, who was the polar bear. He's 6'6", 280. He's a monster, and Marco Huas is a little 195 or whatever, incredibly cut, incredibly muscular, but he looks tiny next to this polar bear. But Paul doesn't want to go to the ground because of his jiu-jitsu, and Marco just is chopping him down with those low Muay Thai kicks to the thigh till he finally falls over. And it was the first time I saw multiple weapons employed and the jiu-jitsu came at the end, but the jiu-jitsu was defense from, Paul had to stand there and be kicked because he didn't want to go to the ground. And I think that's the fight. Jeff Blotnick coins the term a little bit later, but I think that's the first MMA fight. And of course, I advertised UFC 1 as art versus art. It was Taekwondo versus karate versus Kempo versus jiu-jitsu. It was versus, not mixed.
Yeah.
So I think it really is that fight when we see a fighter employ multiple arts in one fight.
And as we said, the chess match.
The chess match.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much I want to talk about. And I know we have time, but I also want to leave things for the next time because I want to ask you about bare knuckle fighting, what you think about that. You mentioned that our fists are not as strong as our heads. So that's taking the protection away from that. And I'm very curious what your thoughts are. But I mean, we'll leave that, I guess, because I definitely want to have you come back on. Thank you so much.
Oh, I would love to. Are you kidding? This is so much fun to talk about this. Because my kids, they'll go, oh God, not again with the UFC.
Oh, this is one of my favorite things to do is sit and talk about, not only just the history of UFC, how it, the intersection of combat sports and society, and also just why humans enjoy this. And maybe I'm just trying to figure out my own psychology, but, and it'll be interesting. What do you, I guess I want to give you the last thought, Campbell. And then again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Charles. You're always invited, and Kyle Green. Thank you. We need to write a paper again sometime soon. But Campbell, do you have anything you want to say to my students in the world?
One, thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure, and I'm very gratified, and it's very, and it's nice to see the sport that I was so involved in being looked at by very smart people. That's very gratifying to me. So thank you. It was a real pleasure. Think about this. You're dealing with, one of the oldest stories. Homer predates the Bible, right? So you're dealing with one of the oldest stories that's talking about this topic, and that's amazing. And you can go through history, and every society has a version of fighting. They just do. Everyone. Mm-hmm. It's human. It really is. But think about this. This is the amazing part of what we're talking about. If we're not talking about boxing or wrestling, we're talking about MMA. The sport's 27 years old, right? And there's references to baseball in Boston in the 1790s that gets banned in Boston because people were breaking windows, right? So obviously Abner Doubleday is commissioned by Congress in the 1870s or 1880s to codify the sport, and the English codify, football, soccer in 1880 or whatever. But those sports went on long before that. So we're looking at this development of a sport codified rules, the promotion of it, the structure of it, pay. You're watching a sport being created, and you don't get that. That doesn't happen, right? I mean, really, what is the last sport? I guess it's the NBA. Is that the newest sport? Right?
Of the dominant ones, yeah, the dominant ones by far.
Yeah, and so here we are, all very much as fans, and I'm a fan. Obviously it's my business, and obviously I'm deeply entrenched in the business, but I'm a fan too. And we're all thinking and talking and sharing about this sport and influencing this sport. I can't influence NBA, right? Even if I bought a team, right? I can't. They're not going to listen to me, and I think the pitcher's mound should be lower. I really do. But nobody listens. No one's going to listen to me. But if I decide championship fights should be 3 rounds in combate instead of 5, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right. And I can respond to people on Twitter or people that gives me ideas or think about it or suggest things. We're all shaping, this, it's not nascent anymore, but it's still very much, it's a teenage sport, and we're having input into this sport. And I mean, I just find that absolutely phenomenal to be part of that on a global basis. So
do you mind if I ask a final question, and hopefully it doesn't lead to probably will lead another hour, but
not my pay scale or anything Andrew Yang is going to pick up, as long as it's not.
Yeah, I'm just curious because you've brought this up a few times, and you even critiqued the athletic writer for kind of not appreciating spectacle. And you come from an arts and entertainment background. One of the things I like about the way you talk about fighting is that you appreciate the storytelling, you appreciate the chaos of it. Do you think there's a danger of something being lost as it moves too far into sport, right? And I always feel like the UFC is trying to navigate this tension of gaining larger acceptance in society, but then not going so far to lose that excitement, to lose that sense that anything could happen. And you have this production, this company that's coming up and achieving success. Like, how do you navigate that? Where you want the danger, you want the craziness of the early years of the UFC, but then it also now is a sport. It's one of the more popular sports globally now. So how do you see that?
That's a great question. And there's 2 aspects to that question. The story side, the sports, fighters being bigger than life, the Muhammad Aliism, Mike Tyson biting off somebody's ear. There's all that great stuff. That's the fun part. That's the part that we all get excited about. But the real part is economics, right? Because why is NFL the power player in sports? It is because of the advertising revenue that the NFL drives, right? NFL makes more money than anyone in the US, right? It is just the powerhouse of media rights and advertising dollars. Think of the Super Bowl, right? We watch the commercials for the Super Bowl that cost $2 million to make, and whatever they're going to get this year, $500,000, $700,000 for the 30-second real estate they're buying, renting. So the advertising side of this is very powerful, particularly in the media consumption of this. So that's the economic part of this. The storytelling part is always going to be great. Yes, it's going to get cleaned up, but every time there's a Conor, the UFC's ratings and to an extent their money goes up because we love that. That's part of what we get. And look, it's the same in other individual sports. Tiger Woods drives golf, right? He really drives golf. And anytime you've got these superstar level athletes where you can see their face, right? In football, you can't, like, here's the guy, right? You can't see their face. But in our sport, you can't see their faces. We get before and after of their face, right? And so I think the heroes will always drive interest in fighting sports. That's not going to change, right? The PFL, and Don Davis is based in your town. Their whole thing is to take the Dana White and the Campbell Mclaren out of this, right? It's not the promoter. It's not Conor McGregor's personality that gets him to jump to the front of the line. It's PFL does, essentially playoffs, right? You
Yeah.
win and you move ahead. They're a failure. No one's watching them. They're well financed. Don Davis is a very smart guy. Ted Leonsis, they've got a lot of money behind them, but they're just not getting the ratings because people like the damn promoters, or they hate the promoter. It doesn't matter. Like, hate, right? Like or hate, doesn't matter. You want the attention. So that aspect is not going to change. Big fights, big athletes, big personalities, big promoters. Don King is despicable, but people would watch his fights. I think as many people hate Dana as like Dana, but they're watching the fights. So that part's not going to change. That is integral to what we do. And it's based on the Homeric aspect of this, or the biblical aspect of this, is the hero is the hero, right? Joseph Campbell's, hero with 1,000 faces, a fighter with 1,000 faces. That's what that is. However, I do think the corporate advertising driven aspect of this will continue to clean up or standardize the sport because they want the advertising dollars, right? And blood on the mat, you've heard that term, right? Advertisers don't want blood on the logo, right? So that's part of it. And I think we're going to see more of that for a little while. What's changing that economic discussion to an extent is the streaming business, because streamers are pay-per-view, and that's how I started this. I don't have to worry about advertisers because I was on an advertiser-free medium. Streaming is an advertiser-free medium, and if the media rights for the promotions continue to be that big from the streamers, they will have less reason to, make the sport more generic or clean it up or make it less bloody, right? So the second part of your question, heroes are heroes. We love heroes fighting, big personalities. Everybody's gonna like Connor. Did you see when he threw that cart at the bus? Did you? Like, it doesn't, when you throw things, they go in a, right, because there's gravity, right? They go on this parabola, but he threw the thing. It was like a line drive. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about? That cart that he threw through the bus, boom! It was like throwing a dart. It was. I mean, I saw that. I go, gee, you know what these guys' muscles are like back there to do that?
And
I thought that was another genius move, by the way. Dana told me to shut the fuck up about that because I was talking about it on Twitter, and
really,
he goes, "You're a fucking idiot."
They promoted the hell out of that, though.
Until the backlash started 3 days after it, until the fighters had glass in their eyes, until they're starting to talk about pulling the license in New York, until, the Nevada Commission is going to ban, like it went south really quickly. It went back to the old days.
Yes. But I also think that if you watched Embedded, they used all the, video of it and used it. And I was on a train when that happened, up to New York, and lost 4 fights because of that. Even that, but I'm still a fan. But it's that spectacle part. So that's what's interesting, as you say that Dana White, I think initially was really pissed about it. If I should have better language, and was very angry towards Connor. But then I think he knows that chaos, I think Kyle used that word, is part of the sport.
Well, that's his Tyson the ear bite.
Exactly.
Right? He didn't lose. He turned the bus upside down, right? He didn't lose.
And that was
scared the hell out of everyone.
Because Connor went on to hit a guy in a bar, stomp on someone's cell phone.
Rape someone. Rape, by the way.
The New York Times has allegedly said yes. So Campbell, but yeah, no, and it's interesting how that that spectacle is embedded in that, and I don't even know where to go from there. But you read the Dolly,
by the way.
Yeah, I think I interrupted the thank you and goodbye by asking another question. So
no, it was a great question. So heroes are heroes, especially in fighting. Advertisers hate buses being smashed and ears being bitten and blood on the logo. But if the streamers come in and become the dominant way that we watch the fighting product, the advertisers have much less influence, and maybe we can go back a little crazier. Bare knuckle boxing being the real example of that, right? I mean, because it's a streaming product. They're never going to get sponsors,
So wait, what do you think? Because Kyle, since you've extended this, I'm gonna ask, what do you think, bare knuckle boxing, what do you think of their projection and their potential success? Or because there were a couple of them at first. I think there's really one left.
There's one now, and they've got some version of money behind them. I mean, not PFL money, not UFC money, not Combate money, but a couple $1 million that they can go event by event. I've been asked to consult for all the 3 different groups. And I know Ken Shamrock wanted, asked me personally to get involved in the one he is working in, because the no rules guy, right? I mean, that's a perfect connection. And I just very politely, been there, done that. I am reasonably respectable now because Combate, it doesn't have this history. So I'm not looking to go back in that. I thought Paige Van Zandt was an interesting signing.
Yes.
Because she's a cutie and that's a bloody sport, right? It may be the safest form of combat sport because it's the physics of it. I mean, it's a face cut sport. It's not a brain damage sport. That's just the truth. That's science.
I agree with you. I'm curious that as we know more about science, as the public has become more educated on CTE, why blood is still, and we go back, we look at Dante, why Dante talks about like seeing blood. It was like you could see people's fears, and like, because why is it that blood is something that people fear and we don't want to see? Yet we know that football, which has padding and no physical, damage, is horrendous. And when I watch football, I wince more than I watch fighting, because of and like we talked about the Jake Paul, who did he fight? Robinson.
Nate Robinson.
I hate watching boxing sometimes because of when a boxer's been concussed and they're allowed to fight again. And, I still like boxing. I just think that that fight could have been called maybe. But no, Campbell, it is interesting to think that blood is still something that you have to worry about.
Well, look, you expressed that very well. That was very articulate, almost poetic. But there's also, regulation, sponsorship, state athletic commissions, diseases that come through. There's a lot of issues with blood that go beyond the cultural or the psychological. In the UFC, we were the first sport to test for HIV, for AIDS. Because in those first UFCs, there was blood everywhere. It was blood everywhere. And I think, we talked about Mccain. The guy that fought Pat Smith, he was a Navy SEAL.
Oh,
Scott Morris.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Scott Morris. And Pat got him down, was sitting on his chest and was giving him a right and coming back with an elbow, then a left and coming back with the elbow. And even I remember when we slowed it down, it still looked very fast. In slow-mo, it looked very fast. I don't know. I mean, he cut him so many times and the face bleeds so much. And that's the picture John McCain used to get us banned. And a lot of it was, look, the guy was not another Navy guy, right? SEALs are tough guys, though. Yeah. Scott was fine. I mean, we had to get all stitched up, but it was no lasting. But that's the image John McCain used, right? Because he was so bloody, just bloody, bloody, bloody.
Yeah.
But so we had to test for AIDS. So, but there's there's issues to that, and I think I think it's such a mixed up thing, and it's also, but we're misinformed. The leather helmet days of football were so much safer.
Yeah.
They just were, but nobody's buying that. All right. And so when I say, face cuts, it's a face cut. Everybody goes, no, it's so dangerous. No, it's a face cut. I mean, you go to the dentist, you bleed, I mean, this is just a lot of blood here, a lot of nerve endings, a lot of blood. But people just don't react. And maybe that's good, Professor. Maybe we should see blood and go, ooh, this is bad. I mean, maybe that actually is a
natural part of being human. Blood, fire bad, blood, that's bad to see. I hear you. I just, I just think that there are a lot of sports that are violent, but just look safe.
There's a lot of endeavor. Like Cirque du Soleil is not a sport, but I don't know what happened this year because all the shows are shut down. But I know last year, 4 people died and 3 had significant spinal injuries. It's like the old days in the trapeze at the circus.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
But I mean, no senator's going to come out against Cirque du Soleil. I mean, where are you going with that?
Yeah.
I think bare knuckle will have its moment. I think that there's always an audience for extreme. What is the Russian porno thing that has the midgets fighting?
Fight Circus.
Yeah,
Fight
Cam
Circus.
Soda on Cam Soda.
And I watched the clips of that. I'm going to. And then this fight in Russia with the huge guy that ran me fighting the woman. You're gonna watch that. You're gonna watch it.
I couldn't watch the end. I don't know who won, but I'm
Cheated.
I hope so. Yes. But yeah, no, I understand. That's
a freak show.
Yeah.
It's a freak show.
Yeah. And I understand that.
People watch car racing for the crashes to an extent. They do. Formula One, not so much. But I think NASCAR, I think that's about the crashes. Yeah. And the equestrian sports are unbelievably dangerous, right? That's how Superman broke his back, right? Christopher Reeves. The equestrian sports are really dangerous.
I think we're arguing the same point here. Completely. I'm definitely on your side here. For me, no, I understand blood is something, another thing you have to worry about in terms of what kind of fluids and all that. So then I have another, okay, this is a curiosity, and maybe I don't want to end on this, but I have to ask. I remember hearing Joe Rogan saying that you guys would spray paint over the blood. Is that for real? I have to ask because he said it on a couple podcasts or something.
No, technically no. I think in a court of law, I could say no. But look, there's a lot of skills cut men have that if you're not on camera, you can do good stuff with. I mean, the cut man, like that's an art form, but they're sitting there, but he's watching them. They're on TV, or at least the live crowd is watching it. Yeah. The cut man can do stuff behind the scene, that can help.
I have to have a class all about the cut man, just to say.
No, it's fascinating. And it comes back to the blood issue, right? Like, why would someone want to be a cut man? I'm not really sure.
Well, FX
or cut woman. We have Carol the cut woman, who's fantastic. So.
And the literary side, FX Tool is his pen name, but the writer of $1 Million Baby, which is a series of short stories, he was a cut man. So bringing it back to literature where I can find it. And Campbell, we are going to be watching Combat America. We see it as a cultural text. And, hopefully someday you could come to our class live as well at some point. That's fantastic. And, but if not, please come back virtually. Thank you so much. This has been like my favorite, I don't know, like, let's just go to 2021 for me because this has been such a blast. So thank you.
I enjoyed it. I'm glad. And I hope somebody got something out of it. I know I'm entertaining, but maybe there was some actual information there. I don't know.
I know I did.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other person have any last words?
China, boom. Love your work. Love your work. Here's the scoop.
Good morning.
I think we're changing the name. from Combate Americas to Combate Global. Global is a great word because I'm sure in China they know global, right? Combate Latin cognate, so everybody knows combate. Global is global in English, global in Spanish, globale in Italian. I think the Portuguese is globala, not sure of that, but we're going to drop America. We've been upgraded.
Wow.
I originally wanted a name that spoke to both continents on our hemisphere, and that worked very well. But we're looking to do more in Spain, more in France. We have offers for other parts of the world. And I'm not to end on a political note, or maybe we should, but the current president has made me a little uneasy about the name America. I mean, it's like not everybody's seen this as a good thing. And I thought global, will work for everyone. And it also lets us bring in a couple fighters from non-Spanish speaking countries, which I think it'll be fun.
That's great. When does this take action? When do we?
I'm not 100%. We're doing research on it. Most of the research we're doing is coming back very favorable. Some of the branding, naming experts. You know what I think the naming people do? They're companies that name companies. You know what I think they do? I think they go and they smoke a joint, and then they stare out the window, and then they go, "What do you think of?" Because that's I think their method. Yeah, but maybe I'm just cynical.
They're making sense, so.
I would just make it combate, except very hard to trademark. There is a fight channel in Brazil called Combate. The execs at UFC call me Combate Americas. They call it because they can't tell the difference between Spanish and Portuguese. To them, it's all those people south of the border, right? So, but there is a fighting channel called Combate in Brazil, and there's some trademark issues around just being Combate, which is what I would go to, because everyone shortens it to Combate anyway. So Combate Global, that's probably what it's going to be.
Thank you. So Combate Global.
You heard it first.
We heard it first. You dropped some bombs with us. You're gonna, 2021, you're gonna bring a transgender fight, which I think the world is ready for. Not to just.
And I got the great opponent. This one's going to be great. People that haters are going to hate. Haters are going to hate. Rogan's going to go crazy. I'm going to taunt Rogan. He hates this idea. I'm going after Dana. Dana's going to hate this idea. And this is going to be this. I'm looking forward to this. Harry Potter's mother, whatever her name, I can't remember her name, J.K. Rowling's, that's come out against transgender people. I'm going after her. I'm going to put her in the same camp with Dana White. It's going to be wonderful.
I know Helen Mirren is a fan of Combate. Get her in the ring here going too. So
I have two queens. I am not making a joke. I have Helen, right, who's the queen, and we didn't talk at all about Kate del Castillo, who is La Reina del Sur, one of the most popular TV shows in the world, very famous Spanish actress. That show is just phenomenal. I'll give you the gringo test, everyone. China, pay attention. This is for you too. If I ask you who's Kate del Castillo, does anyone know who Kate is on this distinguished panel?
No.
Yeah, she interviewed El Chapo.
Boom.
Yeah.
But you passed the gringo test. That was the gringo litmus test. If you're Hispanic, you would say, oh, she's La Reina del Sur, the Queen of the South, the biggest TV show ever in Spanish TV.
Oh.
Non-Spanish speakers know her because she was bait for Sean Penn to bring El Chapo.
Right.
That's why you may have seen, last year I banned Meryl Streep, and she's included in your reading list of articles for the obvious reasons. Mixed martial arts are the arts. I've seen some of her fucking movies. The Devil Wears Prada is not art. It might be a fun movie, but it's not art. I don't care what she says. I've seen her work. It's not, a lot of it's not art. So I banned her last year, and then this year we banned Sean Penn for life. It's a ban for life, and it's because he set my friend Kate up
Yeah.
So I have Helen Mirren, the Queen, and I have La Reina del Castillo. So pretty remarkable.
Very privileged role or group to be in. I know. So people try and get there. But no, that's you. I love that you like to make these waves. In intellectual circles, they do it as well. You kind of, you bait someone, and it's conflict, right? It's just circling back, and I can't wait to see it. I'll be front row and center, and yeah, and I'll probably have my students write something about it. So
They should.
I know.
They really should. Thank you again. Thank you again.
Campbell, you're always a friend of our class here. Thank you, everyone. And everyone have a safe holiday season, and stay in touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll
Happy
Thank
go.
you for having me. Good meeting and seeing you all.
Take it easy, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.